Chapter 713. Looking at the mess on the ground, the manager of the cake shop couldn't help saying in a low voice, "So, Mo, we've taken out all the cake embryos and semi-finished products. After Missy smashes them, we still have a lot of things to buy. Well, why don't we call it a day?" Mo Jingshin glanced at him coldly. "Do you think this cake shop can still operate?" The manager's expression immediately stiffened, and the faces of the shop assistants turned pale. It seemed that Jinwan was really Mo Jingshin's wife, and Mo Jingshin was trying to stand up for her. As a woman, Yi could tell that she had no choice but to suffer losses, but she was most worried about whether her husband's work on this island would be affected. She looked at Mo Jingshin with red eyes, but at this time, Mo Jingshin ignored everyone's gaze, picked up a cell phone, and dialed who knows where. Investigate the hygiene situation of the Royal Dessert Shop on Wonderful Life Street. Find out the legal person and the boss behind the shop. I want this shop to disappear in 24 hours and hand over the manager and the boss to the Argentine Department of Industry and Commerce for investigation. In addition, stop all the joint projects between Argentina and Chinese companies. There's no need to follow up. Hearing Mo Jingshin's words, Yi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Her husband immediately frowned and gave her a reproachful look. Her husband was the eldest son of a political family in Argentina. The cooperation with this island was specially requested by many political representatives of Argentina and Shine Group. After all, the whole world knew that China was a big tourism country, and they all wanted to get in touch with big Chinese companies. This island had been very popular in the past 2 years and was the main cornerstone of Argentina's tourism development. Now, this not only affected his work on this island, but also caused him to lose tens of millions of yuan a year. Now, if Shine Group wanted to terminate the cooperation, it would be the loss of the entire tourism industry that Argentina planned to develop. When he returned, he would have to face a huge responsibility, and it was likely that he would never be able to raise his head again. He also understood the seriousness of this matter and felt as if the sky was going to collapse. Even when Mo Jingshin hung up the phone, Yi was still in a daze. Mo Jingshin coldly watched her. "In addition, all the accounts under your names will be frozen in 5 minutes. The island has been ruled by you and your wife for far too long. Many of the sources of funds need to be thoroughly investigated. As for everything in this cake shop, it will be considered as additional debts that you have to bear." At the same time, he calmly looked at the trembling shop assistants. "Those who don't want to be implicated, immediately calculate the accounts of these cakes and hand them to her, and urge her to settle all debts within 24 hours. Otherwise, Shine Group has the right to ban this shop and send you to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce for investigation. Your names will also be sent to the Consumer Reporting Center in Argentina." The shop assistant's eyes were so wide that an egg could be stuffed inside. Yi was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Jinwan tugged on Mo Jingshin's shirt and looked at him pleadingly. Mo Jingshin knew that she didn't want to stay here, so he helped her solve the problem. Without saying anything more, he took her hand and turned to walk out. When they reached the door, after the crowd outside learned of Mo Jingshin's identity, no one dared to block the way. They consciously opened up a path for them. Mo Jingshin directly brought Jinwan to the milk tea shop opposite. Jinwan finally saw that there was a cup of milk tea and coffee on the round table by the window. Earlier, he was queuing here to buy milk tea for her. She didn't expect that the milk tea would really be sold out. He must have turned around and found her missing, so he came to look for her. Jinwan was led over by him to sit down. She picked up the milk tea and took a sip. It was very sweet. Her mood, which had already been greatly relieved, instantly became even better. She raised her eyes to look at him. "Shunshin, did I cause you trouble earlier?" The man curved his lips, gently saying, "No, it's just that some people don't know what's good for them and seek their own deaths out of habit." Jinwan looked at him, half understanding. She felt that what happened earlier did not seem to affect them. She turned to look out the window. From her position, she could see the scene of the cake shop that was about to be banned. Yi and her husband were arguing about something. The tall Argentinian man, who did not dare to speak earlier, even gave Yi, who was in a sorry state, a slap on the face. He then angrily turned to leave. He was pestered by the shop assistants for money. She was battered and exhausted. Outside, many people were pointing fingers and criticizing her. Jinwan watched the situation while drinking her milk tea. "Do you want to eat cake?" Mo Jingshan asked. She bit on the straw in the cup of milk tea and shook her head. "Not today. Let's talk about it in 2 days." Earlier, the smell of cream on the floor was so disgusting. "I don't want to eat it at all." The man chuckled softly. "It's your birthday in 2 days. I originally planned to bring you to a handmade cake shop to make a cake with you. But since you hate cakes so much, forget it." Jean Wan's gaze immediately rose, filled with excitement. "Make a cake together? I want to, but I've never done it before. I don't know how." The man lightly curved his lips. "Didn't you say it was disgusting earlier?" "That's because the smell of the cake was too strong. It'll be fine in 2 days." Jean Wan reached out to hold his fingers and begged. "Shun Shun, I want to make a cake. I want to make a cake. I want to make a cake." As she spoke, she placed her chin on the table and looked up at him with wide, longing eyes. "I want to make a cake." Mo Jingshan had never seen Jean Wan act so openly and coquettishly. When this woman was sober, she was extraordinarily prideful. She also had a temper. His heart seemed to melt from her stare. The man chuckled softly at her. "I'll make a cake with you on your birthday." Jean Wan immediately sat up in excitement. As she drank her milk tea, she could not hide the anticipation on her face. In contrast to the scene in the milk tea shop, in the cake shop opposite, Yi lost her footing amidst the cake and cream on the floor. Her feet slipped, and she fell into the pile of cream on the floor. When she staggered back up, the shop assistant was still pestering her because her card had been frozen and she could not pay for the cakes. Although Jean Wan did not fully understand, she still felt that he was able to make a shop disappear in such a short period of time. He was also able to make those who bullied her so miserable. Chapter 714. Mo Jingshan accompanied Jean Wan for a long time on the special side street. In the past, Jean Wan also liked to buy all kinds of gadgets when she went shopping, and now she was no exception. Even though she was ill and her memory was confused, her hobby was still the same as before. After buying so many things, when they returned to the hotel, Jean Wan was so tired that she didn't even want to go swimming. She lay on the bed and crawled under the quilt to sleep. Seeing that Jean Wan fell asleep very quickly, he realized that she was really a heartless big baby who fell asleep as soon as she said she would. He watched her for a while with a smile, walked over to help her pull up the quilt, pushed back the hair on her cheek, and touched her head. After making sure she was sleeping comfortably, he turned to go to the sofa living room of the suite. As soon as he arrived in the living room, the manager of Shine Group in charge of regional tourism management in Argentina called him and asked nervously, "So, Mo, do you really want to end the cooperation with Argentina on the Chinese tourism project?" When I received the news, I thought I heard wrong. They said that you have canceled the project qualification of Argentina." "You heard right. Do it." "Okay, I understand." Jean wanted to know that Mo Jingshan could cook. When she was in the Yu Garden, Auntie Chun and the servants made all kinds of delicious and nutritious food for her. When Jinwan woke up, it was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. She tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. She turned to see the light in the sofa living room was on, so she lifted the quilt, got out of bed, and quietly opened the door, but she didn't see Mo Jingshan in the living room. This suite had its own kitchen. Jinwan leaned against the door and listened carefully for a while. She seemed to hear the sound of the range hood in the kitchen, so she tiptoed over and gently pushed open the kitchen's glass door. At a glance, she saw the man standing by the counter, cutting vegetables. Jinwan stared at him blankly for a long time. When she realized that he seemed to be preparing to cook, she smiled. Thinking that he couldn't hear her, she tiptoed over, stretched out her arms, and hugged his waist tightly. Mo Jingshan knew she had woken up the moment she appeared outside the kitchen door. However, due to her sudden movement, he paused the knife in his hand and glanced sideways at the little woman who was holding him and pressing her face against his back. "Did you sleep well?" I'm so tired from walking on the streets during the day. Did I sleep for a long time?" The man casually glanced at the sky outside the window. Fortunately, it's not that long. In fact, Jinwan slept for 5 hours. Sleep was very helpful to the absorption of blood into her brain, so Mo Jingshin did not intend to wake her up at dinner time. However, she was about to wake up, so there was no need to ask the hotel staff to specially send food over. He only asked the staff to send some ingredients and meat, and he would cook. It was just nice for Jinwan to eat the food. When she woke up, Jinwan rubbed her face hard against his back and breathed in the scent of his clothes. Shunshin, your body smells so good. Mo Jingshin chuckled softly, allowing her to continue hugging him as he methodically cut the vegetables. He said mildly, "What? You're so hungry after a night's sleep. Are you going to eat me up?" Hearing this, Jinwan mischievously opened her mouth and bit his arm. She bit him quite hard, but the man did not even frown. He only turned to look at her. "Are you really going to eat me up?" Jinwan blinked at him. "I said your body smells so good. It's not that kind of fragrance, but another kind. I don't know how to describe it, but it smells so good." Mo Jingshin curved his lips. Because his fingers were stained with vegetables, he raised his hand and pushed her little head away with the back of his hand. "Go. Return to the living room and sit down. There are cut fruits on the coffee table. Go watch TV or use the iPad. When the food is ready, I'll call you to eat. Don't stand behind me like a hungry ghost." Jinwan immediately pouted. "I just want to be with you." Mo Jingshin's smile deepened. "Then go bring a chair over and put it by the side. Sit there obediently and watch." "All right." Hearing this, Jinwan immediately let go of his waist. She turned and ran out happily. Mo Jingshin could not help but furrow his brows when he heard her running. He said to the outside, "Run slowly. Don't fall." Qin Sighting said that he had been accompanying Jinwan every day and was becoming more and more like a worrisome old father. At this moment, Mo Jingshin finally understood the meaning of the word old father. He really couldn't take a single glance away from her. He couldn't be at ease even for a moment. Jinwan ran out and looked around the room, but could not find a chair. In the end, she ran into the study and brought out a chair. The chair was large and heavy, and it was difficult for her to carry it. After much difficulty, she finally moved it into the kitchen. Mo Jingshin had already turned on the stove, so it was not convenient for him to help her move it. He turned around and saw that the little woman was so tired that her face was red and she was panting heavily just to bring a chair in to watch him cook. He sighed with a smile. "Just put it by the door. Sit there and watch." "Okay." Jinwan obediently put down the chair and sat down like an especially obedient primary school student. She placed her hands obediently on her lap and stared at him. Seeing her gaze, Mo Jingshin chuckled. "Were you hungry when you woke up?" Jinwan nodded. In. The hotels on this island are not like those in China. They mainly serve seafood. Although the vegetables and meat are fresh, they're different from those in China. The taste may be slightly different. Try to eat some, and it smells so good. Shinshin, I can definitely eat a lot of the food you cook." Mo Jingshin smiled. "You are sick, but your mouth has become much sweeter." Jinwan looked at him. "When I was not sick, did I eat the food you cooked?" "Yes." "Did I say it was not delicious?" Mo Jingshin raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. She did not say this, but every time she ate it, she would look particularly unwilling as if she did not want to eat it. She would never admit that it was delicious, but she would almost always finish it. In the end, when she was full, she would lean against the side and continue to play the role of a little ingrate. Especially after she returned from London, she did not admit it even once. "No, you also liked to eat in the past, but I didn't have much time to accompany you, and you didn't get to eat it often," the man said and quickly put a dish on a plate. Chapter 7:15. Mo Jingshin glanced at the freshly cooked rice by the side. "Wait a little longer. It's a little hot." Jinwan made an O sound and continued to sit there and wait patiently. When she could finally eat, Jinwan jumped up in joy and couldn't help hugging Mo Jingshin again. Mo Jingshin was hugged by this little woman all the way. It was as though a koala bear was hanging from his body. He carried the food out, placed it in the dining room, and then hugged the little woman hanging from his body. He lowered his head and kissed her on the forehead tenderly. "All right, go wash your hands and eat." Jinwan raised her head and kissed him hard on the chin. She was about to turn to wash her hands when she suddenly paused and turned to look at him, saying, "Shun Shun, why is your body so hot?" Mo Jingshin rubbed her hair. "Maybe it's because I've been busy in the kitchen for a long time. It's a little hot. Go wash your hands." Jinwan hesitated for a moment and then turned to the bathroom. When it was time to eat, Jinwan asked Mo Jingshan to eat with her. She sat close to him and picked up food from time to bring it to his mouth, insisting on feeding him a few mouthfuls. Fortunately, the dishes Mo Jingshan made tonight were relatively light, and the two of them were used to it. In the past 2 days on the island, they could hardly live without seafood. Finally, they had a normal meal. Jinwan had always liked his cooking. Even if she didn't remember it, she still ate with great relish. In the end, her stomach was almost bulging. She shouted that she couldn't eat anymore, but she still stuffed a few mouthfuls of food into her mouth. In the end, she was so full that she lay on the sofa and refused to move. By the time they finished eating, it was past 10 o'clock at night. Jinwan had slept for 5 hours and was not sleepy at all. She simply sat on the sofa and watched TV. Mo Jingshan brought a blanket over for her and turned to work in the study. As the night deepened, Jinwan was enjoying herself watching TV when she vaguely heard Mo Jingshan's low, heavy coughing coming from the study. She thought she had heard wrong and pricked up her ears to listen for a while. Not hearing anything, she continued to sit on the sofa and watch TV. After who knew how long, the door of the study opened. Jinwan turned back and did not see his expression. She only saw him enter the kitchen, pour a glass of water, and return to the study with the glass. It wasn't until 1 o'clock in the evening that Jinwan gradually felt sleepy again. However, she went shopping during the day and went straight to bed when she came back in the afternoon. She didn't take a shower at all. She still loved cleanliness. She got up and went back to the bedroom to take a comfortable bath. After the bath, she didn't know where she put the hairdryer. In the morning, Mo Jingshan had dried her hair, so she didn't pay much attention to where he put it. Jinwan walked out while drying her hair. She looked around for a hairdryer, but could not find one. She could only shout toward the study, "Shun Shun, I want to blow-dry my hair. Where did you put the hairdryer?" There was no response from the study. Jinwan asked again, but there was still no response. Feeling strange, she walked over and carefully knocked on the door. Seeing that there was no movement inside, she was just about to ask if he was busy when she suddenly heard a muffled sound of something falling to the ground. The sound wasn't soft either. When Jinwan heard the sound, she subconsciously pushed the study door open. The light in the study was soft, and the computer on the table was open. Mo Jingshan was reading the company documents. However, Jinwan's gaze abruptly shifted down and saw Mo Jingshan lying on the ground. "Shun Shun." Jinwan saw that Mo Jingshan was lying on the ground and was startled. She rushed in and squatted by his side. She saw that his eyes were closed, and his handsome brows seemed to be wrinkled from discomfort. Jinwan stared at him in a daze and tentatively reached out to push him twice. "Shun Shun, what's wrong?" Mo Jingshan opened his eyes slightly and saw the obvious fear in Jinwan's eyes. He instinctively wanted to get up to avoid scaring her, but after trying for a long time, he could not get up. He could only force himself to speak hoarsely. "It's nothing, go find the hotel staff and call a doctor over." "Shun Shun, what's wrong with you?" Jinwan hurriedly nodded and reached out to touch his body. She found that his body was even hotter than when he was eating. When she saw that he had closed his eyes after speaking, she anxiously cried, "Shun Shun, don't scare me, ah?" "Shun Shun, wake up." Mo Jingshan furrowed his brows, but did not open his eyes. "Call a doctor." "Right, call a doctor." He had just asked her to call a doctor. Jinwan hurriedly stood up. In the end, she was in too much of a hurry, and her leg knocked hard against the chair by the side. Her entire body staggered and almost fell. She endured the pain and finally managed to steady herself. She rushed to run out, but she had only taken a few steps when she was suddenly attacked by a strong wave of dizziness. Her entire body swayed, and she leaned heavily against the door. Her head was pressed against the door, and she felt that it was especially heavy. No matter how hard she tried, she could not lift it up. Jinwan's head throbbed as she raised her hand to place it on top of her head. After a long time, she was unable to calm down. She used her hand to knock against her head and shook it. It was as though there was a thread of clarity reminding her that she had to call a doctor immediately. She could not delay any longer. In the end, she gritted her teeth and endured the pain in her head that felt as though it was about to explode. She staggered out of the room, opened the door, and shouted in a panic, "Is there anyone here? Someone come call a doctor." There was a hotel staff in charge of this suite nearby. When they heard Jinwan's panic cries, they thought that something had happened and immediately rushed over. "Mrs. M.O., what's wrong?" The moment they saw Jinwan's pale face, lips, and body trembling, the staff thought that something had happened to her and reached out to support her. However, Jinwan shook her head and pointed in the direction of the study. "Go call a doctor." The staff understood her meaning and quickly walked in. When she pushed open the door of the study, she was shocked to see Mr. M.O. lying on the ground. She was startled and hurriedly picked up the phone to inform the other staff downstairs. They would immediately send the best doctor here and make the necessary arrangements. Then she struggled to help M.O. Jingshin up and said with a frown, "Mr. Mo's body is very hot. He must have a fever. Mrs. M.O., did he eat anything tonight?" Jinwan returned with a shocked expression. She shook her head in confusion. "There's only rice, vegetables, and cooked beef. That shouldn't be. How could he have such a serious fever?" When Jinwan heard that M.O. Jingshin seemed to have a serious fever, her eyes, which had just been crying, immediately turned red again. "I don't know." As she said this, Jinwan bit her lip and felt that she was particularly useless. Shunshin was so good to her, but she did not even know in advance that he had a fever and was unable to help him. She was so useless. When would she become the amazing version of herself in the video? Chapter 716. Although M.O. Jingshin had suddenly fainted due to a high fever, he was able to open his eyes slightly by the time the doctor arrived. He hoarsely instructed them not to scare Jinwan and to wait in the living room with her. He also instructed them not to say too much to scare her. After examining him, the doctor asked, "So, M.O., do you have a history of stomach problems?" M.O. Jingshin lay on the bed with his eyes closed, speaking hoarsely. "Yes. 2 years ago in Los Angeles, I worked day and night and didn't eat regularly for a long time. I was once sent to the hospital because of stomach spasms." "That's right. You're very healthy, but you have a history of stomach problems. You can eat anything on a normal diet, but it's not suitable for you to eat too much cold food for a long time. We've lived here for a long time, so we know the habits of the people here. Your main and secondary meals on the island for the past 2 days must have been mostly seafood. Your stomach was already a little uncomfortable. Did you drink anything like iced coffee after that?" M.O. Jingshin raised his hand to rub his forehead, speaking hoarsely with a sigh. "I drank a few cups." The doctor nodded. "As expected, it's an acute gastritis caused by multiple stimuli. It's not a big problem, but it's best for you to eat a light diet. Right now, your body temperature is very high. After your fever goes down, take some antibiotics on time. You'll be fine in 2 days. There's no need to worry." M.O. Jingshin did not say anything more. He glanced at the hotel staff who had just entered the bedroom. "Where is she?" "Mrs. M.O. is in the living room. Don't worry, we've been comforting her, but she seems to be very worried about you. Her complexion is also very poor. Do you want a doctor to take a look at her?" M.O. Jingshin raised his hand with difficulty, stopping the doctor from looking for her outside. "She's very resistant to the touch of an unfamiliar doctor. Just accompany her quietly." The staff nodded and did not say anything more. Westerners rarely took injections unless it was really necessary. After the doctor gave M.O. Jingshin some medicine for his fever and gastritis, he instructed the hotel staff to prepare an ice pack to lower his body temperature. After confirming that there were no other problems with M.O. Jingshin's body, he left. The doctor also said that he would stay in another room in the hotel tonight. If anything happened, he would immediately rush over. He told Mr. M.O. not to worry. M.O. Jingshin indifferently nodded. After everyone left, the hotel staff asked if they needed someone to stay behind to take care of him. However, Imo Jingshun indicated for them to leave, in case Jinwan was not used to having so many people in the room. It was already late at night, past 2 o'clock in the morning. Jinwan stood in the living room, but was not sleepy at all. Standing by the window, she could see the azure sea. After the doctor and the others left, she did not dare to enter the bedroom. She heard from them that Shun Shun's fever was very serious and that he needed to rest after taking the medicine. She was afraid that she would disturb him if she entered, so she had been standing outside. But after more than an hour, the more she couldn't see him, the more worried she became. She leaned forward and leaned her forehead against the floor-to-ceiling window. She stared blankly at the dark sea outside the window. On such a large island, one could see the ebb and flow of the tide at a fixed time every day. Right now, it was the time when the tide rose around the island. The calm sea slowly rose in the night, and the waves were much more turbulent than during the day, repeatedly beating against the beach and the reefs in the distance. Jinwan stared outside in a daze, and many scenes kept circling in her mind. She closed her eyes and banged her head against the floor-to-ceiling window. It did not hurt much, but when her head banged against the cold window, it seemed to relieve the inexplicable swelling pain in her head. She closed her eyes, but the scene of Imo Jingshun falling on the floor of the study kept replaying. Jinwan slowly furrowed her brows and raised her hand to press hard against her increasingly painful head. All of a sudden, she heard 2 light coughs from a bedroom. She opened her eyes with a jerk and rushed to run in. The fever medicine that Imo Jingshun had taken should have taken effect. His forehead was gradually covered in sweat, but at the same time, the medicine allowed him to fall into a deep sleep. Seeing the sweat on his forehead, Jinwan walked over to the bedside. She took out a tissue from a box by the side and wiped it messily for him. Not long after, she saw that his forehead was covered in sweat again. Jinwan continued to wipe it for him with reddened eyes. As she wiped, she said, "Shun Shun, it's all my fault. I don't even know how to take care of you." In his sleep, Imo Jingshun seemed to have heard her voice. He furrowed his brows, but did not wake up. Jinwan reached out to pick up the ice pack that had fallen from his forehead and touched his forehead. She instinctively felt that his temperature was not as high as before. She stared at him for a moment and seemed to have thought of something. She threw away the tissue she had been holding and ran into the bathroom to fetch a basin of clean water. She then brought a clean white towel back to the bedside and wet the towel in the water. She wrung it until it was half dry and then, bit by bit, wiped the sweat off his forehead. After more than half an hour, he finally stopped sweating. Jinwan placed her hand on his forehead again. After confirming that his fever was no longer high, she brought the water back to the bathroom. For the entire night, Jinwan would occasionally return to the bedside to watch Imo Jingshun. She would also occasionally head to the living room to stand by the window and watch the waves outside. When the sky was about to brighten, she instinctively turned to enter the kitchen. Not long after, she came out and returned to the bedroom. 8 o'clock. Imo Jingshun opened his eyes. His fever had already subsided during the night. After a good night's sleep, the moment he woke up, he no longer felt any discomfort. He was someone who rarely got sick, and it was rare for him to have a fever. Now that the fever had subsided, it was no big deal. However, he turned to see the little woman sleeping by the bedside. Seeing that Jinwan did not seem to have a good rest, the man slowly raised his hand and rubbed her head. The moment his hand touched her, Jinwan abruptly woke up. She raised her eyes to look at him. "You're awake?" Imo Jingshun's raised hand suddenly stiffened. He stared into her eyes. Although her eyes were still drowsy from waking up, the sobriety that he had not seen for a long time struck his heart harshly. Jinwan thought that he was feeling unwell. She stood up and reached out to touch his head. "Your fever is gone. Is your stomach uncomfortable? I used the leftover rice from last night to make porridge and have been cooking it in the rice cooker. It's just right for you to drink. I'll go get it for you." Jinwan spoke and turned to leave. However, Imo Jingshun did not take his eyes off her back. Regardless of whether it was her gaze or the tone of her voice, he abruptly stood up, tugged the blankets off the bed, and walked out. He watched as Jinwan turned to close the small window in the living room, and then turned to head to the kitchen. He abruptly called out, "Jinwan." Jinwan's footsteps paused. She did not turn back. "Are you all right?" The man's voice carried a slight, probing tone, but it carried at least 90% certainty. Jinwan did not speak and continued to walk toward the kitchen. Mo Jingshin directly walked over. With his long legs, he caught up with her in a few steps. He held her shoulders and forcefully turned her body around. He lowered his eyes to look into her eyes. "Tell me, are you all right? Awake? Have you remembered everything? N. Dash." Chapter 717. The moment Jinwan was turned around, she could not hide the redness in her eyes. "Isn't it all because you scared me? Otherwise, I would have continued to be silly for a while longer." There was no need to say more. Just this sentence alone was enough to move Mo Jingshin. The man's hands held her shoulders tightly. He looked into her eyes. "Who am I?" Jinwan stared at him. After holding in for a long time, she finally said, "Mo Jingshin." She placed a heavy emphasis on these 3 words. There was even a sense of distance between them. However, this stubborn and unyielding temper was truly her. "I'll go get some porridge for you. You didn't seem to be sick before, but you suddenly collapsed on the ground. I was so scared that my soul almost left my body," Jinwan said as she pushed him. However, not only did he not push her away, but the man who had always been indifferent and calm suddenly smiled as if he couldn't hide it no matter how hard he tried. He was about to hug her when Jinwan quickly blocked his chest. "Hey, let me get a bowl of porridge first." The man ignored her actions. He pulled her hand down and held it firmly in his palm. He then pulled her into his embrace. Jinwan could not resist and could only hammer his shoulders several times. She could only hear the man's low and hoarse voice by her ear. "Your head doesn't hurt anymore?" Jinwan paused and shook her head. "It was much better a few days ago. Some things always appear before my eyes. It's as though when I sleep, I'm awake for a while. However, I'm always asleep, but many things in my dreams are clear and no longer as messy. Yesterday, I was scared by you again. Otherwise, I might have been able to continue acting like a fool in front of you for a few more days. The doctor said that you can't be agitated right now. Otherwise, your emotions will be affected. If I had known that agitating you would be effective, I would have long since laid on the ground." The man rubbed her head as he spoke. "Were you badly frightened last night?" "Nonsense. A grown man suddenly lying on the ground. Even I would be frightened when I'm normal, much less when I was in that state." Jinwan poked his waist as she spoke. "Can you let me go to the kitchen to bring the porridge out? If it boils any longer, it'll turn into soup." "I'll drink the soup too. There's no rush." "Jinwan, but I haven't eaten breakfast yet. I want to eat too. I don't want to drink rice soup." Mo Jingshin's hand rubbed the back of her head, as though to confirm if there were any problems with her head injuries. He then lowered his eyes to look at her. He saw that although the little woman was saying all sorts of lukewarm words, her ears were already completely red. Even her fair neck was stained with a pink hue. Feeling the man finally let go of her, Jinwan quickly took 2 steps back and raised her hand to rub her cheeks and ears unnaturally, as though trying to cover the red and hot places. Thinking that he couldn't see it, she turned and rushed into the kitchen. The porridge had been cooked for a long time and did not really turn into soup. After all, the white rice on this island did not have the same texture as the ones in China. The texture was slightly hard, but now that it was cooked, it was fragrant, sweet, and soft. The texture was just right. Mo Jingshin had a high fever last night, so this porridge was relatively light and easy to digest. Jinwan was not sure she had really recovered, but at the very least, she felt that she was no longer as muddle-headed. Although she felt her head was especially heavy and tired when she tried hard to think, and her brain even hurt a little, it was likely that she needed to recover bit by bit. Last night, she stood by the window in a daze for a long time. For a long time, she forced herself to think about things and straighten out those messy and disorderly memories bit by bit. After those memories were straightened out, many things that she did not understand were gradually solved, and she began to remember more things. For For the time being, she did not overuse her brain. If she tried too hard to think about more things, she would not feel uncomfortable. For her to be able to recover in such a short period of time, it was likely due to Mo Jingshan's meticulous company and care. On the other hand, it was likely that the upgraded targeted medicine developed by Dr. Chen's friend in the research institute was extremely effective. She was already extremely lucky to be able to keep her life. Right now, Jinwan's heart was not thinking about anything else. She found that she had walked between life and death more than once, and it was truly a different feeling. After scooping the porridge, she turned to leave when she abruptly saw Mo Jingshan leaning against the kitchen door with his arms crossed. A pair of black eyes that were as calm as the sea was watching her. Jinwan walked over and was about to bring the porridge to the dining table to call him to eat. However, before she could even take 2 steps, the man's hand had already reached over. Using the advantage of his height and long legs, he could almost completely hug her. He reached out and picked up the spoon in the bowl in front of her. At the same time, he scooped a spoonful of porridge and put it back. Jinwan did not understand what he was trying to do. She could not help but turn back to look at him, only to see that the man only tasted a mouthful of the porridge she cooked. It seemed like he had not eaten anything she cooked for a long time. It was clearly just porridge, but Jinwan subconsciously observed his expression. How does it taste? I put a small amount of fine salt and minced vegetables and meat powder in the porridge. After all, you need to replenish your strength after sweating from a fever. It won't do if there's no taste at all. The man took a sip and did not speak. He gestured for her to turn around. Jinwan turned around and allowed him to continue tasting it. After standing in front of the kitchen door and casually drinking 2 or 3 mouthfuls, the man looked at her expressionlessly. Didn't you taste it first? I cooked it in a hurry and have been cooking it in the rice cooker. I just opened it earlier and haven't had a chance to taste it. Jinwan glanced at the bowl in her hand as she spoke. She reached out to pick up the spoon he had just used to take a sip. However, the moment she moved, the man picked up the spoon in the bowl and took another sip. Jinwan. She thought that he did not want her to use his spoon. She only glanced at him and did not say anything. However, just as Jinwan was about to turn around to place the bowl on the table, the man bent down and approached her. Jinwan abruptly looked at the face that remained incomparably handsome despite being sick for an entire night. Her gaze faltered. What are you doing? The man smiled mildly and was about to kiss her. Jinwan finally realized that he intended to feed it to her. However, she understood his intentions. The man paused just as he was about to press his lips against hers. Then, Jinwan heard the sound of the man swallowing the porridge. So what exactly was he trying to do? Jinwan looked at him strangely. Seeing the little woman's confused expression, Mo Jingshan sighed with a smile. Forget it. I just had a fever last night. If I feed it like this, it'll be easy for me to infect you. Chapter 718. Mo Jingshan's elegant and deep brows moved slightly. You mean I can kiss you? Jinwan, before the incident in Los Angeles, no matter in Jing City or anywhere else, didn't he kiss her whenever he wanted to? Was he trying to take advantage of her now? Or was he beginning to restore his old, cunning character, knowing that she had let go of the knot in her heart? Jinwan rolled her eyes at him. No. With that, she quickly went to the dining table, put down the bowl, and hurried back to the kitchen. As she walked, she said, "You eat first. I'll get myself another bowl. I'm so hungry." Mo Jingshan glanced at her, but did not say much. He went to the dining table, as he was told. When Jinwan came out with another bowl, she also brought 2 sets of cutlery over. She handed the cutlery to Mo Jingshan. The man watched her as she lowered her head to eat the porridge and said casually, "After you woke up, you refused to look at me even when you were eating. So, a few days ago, the little rascal who kept hugging and kissing me, and even clung to me and refused to leave, was it you?" Jinwan. A person's subconscious would inevitably have some unrestrained side, such as the childish side or the wild side. But what she showed Mo Jingshan was the most innocent, childish, pure, and harmless side. Jinwan bit the spoon, raised her head to glance at him, and asked vaguely, "Don't you think that's stupid?" "You're not stupid. It's a little cute, especially when you clung to me and refused to leave and kept asking me if I had something good in my pants. Jinwon, calm down, calm down. She couldn't let him off so easily just because of a life-and-death crisis in Los Angeles. Jinwon soaked in the pool and held her breath for a long time, but this time, her brain injury was indeed serious. In the past, she could swim, and she could hold her breath in the water for much longer than now. Now, after holding her breath for a few seconds, she would have a headache because of the lack of oxygen. She had to come out of the water to take a few deep breaths before diving back in again. After repeating this for a long time, the time he could hold his breath gradually lengthened. He kept chanting in his heart, "Calm down, I have to calm down." Originally, Jinwon did not plan on coming out to swim again. However, the doctor who came last night came to check on Mo Jingshin today to see if his gastritis had improved. Jinwon did not enter. She stayed on a sofa in the living room for a while and planned to come out for a walk. Mo Jingshin knew that she was no longer muddle-headed and allowed her to come out, but she was not allowed to leave the hotel. This hotel's business was very good. There were many people in the front, but only the exclusive area near the suite and the separate swimming pool were empty, so Jinwon simply came here. By the side, there were new bath towels and swimsuits delivered to her according to her measurements every day. Jinwon sat by the pool for a while before changing into her swimsuit and entering the water. The doctor had already left. Mo Jingshin only had a sudden attack of gastritis. His fever had subsided, and he had taken some anti-inflammatory medicine and eaten a light diet for a few days. He should be fine now. The man stood in front of the window and looked at the round blue swimming pool in the green grass opposite the window. The white figure swam around like a mermaid in it, and then very consciously practiced holding his breath to train the intensity of oxygen in his brain. He watched as Jinwon swam in the water. She was no longer as excited and curious as she was a few days ago. After swimming for a while, she would rest for a while and then continue swimming. After watching for a long time, 2 housekeeping staff knocked on the door at 2 p.m. and came in to clean. Seeing that Mo Jingshin was still in the room, they respectfully said, "Mr. Mo, we're coming in to clean. Are we disturbing you?" Mo Jingshin calmly responded and did not say much. Hearing CEO Mo's response, the 2 men hurriedly began to tidy up the various rooms in the large suite. Hearing the sound of the carpet cleaner, Mo Jingshin slowly shifted his gaze away from the figure in the water. He seemed to have thought of something and turned to ask the housekeeping staff who was wiping in the living room, "Is there any fresh roses in the hotel?" The housekeeping staff carefully recalled, "Yes, Mr. Mo. As you know, this is the only 7-star hotel on this island. Every day, we receive thousands of roses by air. A large portion of them are used to decorate Western food or to place petals on the beds of newlyweds who come here for their honeymoon. Furthermore, they're all very expensive Bulgarian roses." She recalled that back in Jing City, there was a brat who was not afraid of death who gifted Jinwon a large bouquet of roses. In the end, he threw it into the trash can in front of her. Mo Jingshin calmly asked, "How many roses are there today?" "We haven't used them yet. We usually prepare them in the afternoon and only use them in the evening. Have them send them over again. Bring me the ones we have now." "All right, Mr. Mo." Hearing Mo Jingshin's orders, the housekeeping staff did not dare to delay and immediately went out to make arrangements. Half an hour later, Jinwon was still practicing holding her breath in the pool. She had checked on the internet and found that for a head injury like hers, there would usually not be much of a problem. At worst, there would only be occasional headaches. If she did not want to have such side effects, she had to keep exercising after her recovery. She could also go swimming frequently to practice holding her breath and train the intensity of oxygen in her brain. This way, her recovery would be faster. As long as she persevered, it would not take long before even this most common side effect would be eradicated. After practicing for a long time, she could hold her breath in the water for 12 to 13 seconds. Every time she came out of the water, she would feel her breathing become smoother. This time, she persevered for an extra second. The moment Jinwon's head came out of the water, she opened her eyes and was startled. Beads of water flowed down from her eyelashes. She rushed to brush the water from her face and eyes to the side. She saw that the man who was supposed to be resting in the room was standing by the pool. In his hand was a bouquet of tender and beautiful roses. They were red, especially bright and beautiful red roses. Jinwan was stunned. "What are you doing with the roses? Don't you like them?" The man looked at her and casually said, "The hotel had them, so I brought them over." Jinwan, he really did not hide it all. He said that it was specially flown over from a certain country for her, and that it was fine if he said it just to move her, but in the end he told her that it was already in the hotel. She remained in the pool. Originally, she wanted to say that she did not want them. However, when she raised her eyes, she saw that the man who had always been calm and collected was holding the bouquet of roses, as though he was devoutly waiting for her to come out of the pool. Jinwan quickly lowered her head and dived back into the water. Chapter 719. When they finally reached the shore, Jinwan was carried out of the water by Mo Jingshin. Because she had deliberately hidden in the water for too long, her head hurt. When she finally came out, she swayed in the pool and fell back into the water. This time, she was not prepared to hold her breath and immediately choked on a mouthful of water. Thankfully, Mo Jingshin's eyes and hands were sharp, and he directly fished her out. However, the moment he came out, Jinwan was still lying in his arms and coughed several times against the ground. She choked uncomfortably and coughed so badly that her head hurt. Mo Jingshin was worried that there would be a problem as soon as she recovered. He directly picked up the towel from the recliner and wrapped it around her body. At the same time, he helped her dry her head and lowered his head to check her complexion. "Are you all right? You choked so badly and coughed so hard. Does your head hurt?" Jinwan nodded. Before she could speak, the man abruptly lifted her up along with the towel. The moment Jinwan's feet were in the air, she clearly felt the man's concern. Thus, she instantly felt evil. She suddenly raised her hand and moved it up his chest, softly saying, "Shunshin." Mo Jingshin's arm that was holding her instantly stiffened. Jinwan could clearly feel the man's body stiffen and the sudden low pressure. How afraid was he that her sobriety today was only a flash in the pan? He was afraid that she would return to her original state of being so muddle-headed that she didn't even know how to fight back when she was bullied. After experiencing so many dangers, life and death, she walked out step by step. At this moment, Jinwan suddenly felt that she had gone a little too far. In the days after her accident, Mo Jingshin had endured all that he should and shouldn't have endured. He protected her by his side and never left her side. At this time, if she continued to joke about her own physical condition and recovery, it seemed that she had really gone too far. Jinwan raised her eyes and secretly glanced at the man's expression. She tugged on the clothes on his chest. When a man felt that her actions were like a spoiled child from a few days ago, he lowered his head to look at her, only to see that Jinwan was smiling brightly. "I'm joking." The man clearly didn't think that this was an interesting joke. He didn't have the slightest intention of laughing. He lowered his eyes to look at her shoulders and swimsuit that weren't wrapped in a towel, and her hair that was still half wet around her neck. His expression was subtle. "Are you joking?" Jinwan didn't think much of it. She pursed her lips and said, "Just now, in order to get me out of the water, you threw the roses you were going to give me into the water. Can't I make a joke to ease my regret? Didn't you say you didn't want it?" "I didn't say anything." "Okay, I'll make it up to you on your birthday tomorrow." She didn't say anything more. She leaned her heavy head on his shoulder and let him hold her. She let him hold her and gave a lazy "oh." The man carried her out of the pool and back to the hotel. After entering the door, Jinwan was about to get down from his arms. However, the man directly kicked the door shut. Not only did he not put her down, but Jinwan felt the man's arm around her waist with great strength. She was then thrown onto the sofa by the man. Her back bumped against the sofa lightly, but it didn't hurt. At the same time, her entire body was pressed against him. She raised her head in a panic, only to be met with the man's lips that were pressing down on her. Mo Jingshin kissed her fiercely, almost wantonly. He nibbled lightly and then moved deeper. Taking advantage of the moment when she was about to faint, he pried open her teeth and attacked without any gentleness. He forcefully invaded every part of her mouth, deeply and lingering. Originally, because she had just woken up and her body couldn't withstand any torment, he didn't plan to do anything to her. But she had the ability to provoke him. "Are you joking, In?" The man hooked her tongue and tangled with it. At the same time, when he let go of her lips, his low, husky voice pressed against her lips. Jinwon heard the danger in his tone. Her entire nervous senses were drowned by him. His breath, his taste, seemed to penetrate every inch of her skin. She wanted to resist, but couldn't. Being kissed by him like this, she finally realized that when the man carried her through this door, he was like a beast that had been suppressed for a long time. Step by step, he tolerated her, let her, doted on her, and protected her. In the end, he was still angered by her. In an instant, it was all based on his own will, and he was unbridled and powerful. He had indeed tolerated for a long time. Since that time, he had promised not to mess around with her without her permission. Later, after being separated for so long, he couldn't bear to frighten her, let alone provoke her. He had endured for a long time. Even when this little woman climbed on top of him again and again, when she was unconscious, and asked him innocently how they slept together as husband and wife, he had endured all of this. But this little woman was really courageous. As a result, under the forcible catalysis of all the expectations and longing he had accumulated, his desire to let her go surged terrifyingly. In fact, since the moment he pressed against her, Jinwon could clearly feel his lower body pressing against her. "Kiss softly," she called out his name. Her voice was like a weak cat's. "Mo Jingshin." The man's voice was hoarse, but it was too sexy. "In? I've just gotten a little better, and you're already so shameless. Can't you just endure for a little longer?" Her seductive yet unconscious voice provoked the man's body to want to go further. He chuckled lowly and huskily. "I haven't endured." "Haven't I endured long enough? Then why didn't you take the opportunity when I was climbing on top of you earlier? I was so proactive back then." The man chuckled lowly. "Sheen Sighting said that you only have the IQ of a 10-year-old. Your eyes are too naive. I'm not a pedophile. I really can't bear to do it." Jinwon. Her face turned even redder and hotter. "Then what's wrong with my eyes right now? Am I not naive now? If I wasn't naive, I would have stayed in London until I died and never returned to High City." He lowered his head and sucked on her ear, causing her to moan sensitively. The man chuckled lowly, right by her ear. "Right now, in your eyes, there's me. Don't flatter yourself. This is just a reflection. I'm just going to swim, and you're running around in front of me. Otherwise, how could there be you?" Feeling the man's actions becoming more and more excessive, this undisguised intimacy caused Jinwon to blush from her face to her ears. "Don't." Chapter 720. Jinwon narrowed her eyes at him. "You know, I'm only 25 years old. There are so many modern women who only get married and have children in their 30s. Why don't I wait another 8 to 10 years? Mo Jingshin chuckled softly. "I can wait 8 to 10 years. I don't mind being an old father by then. However, no matter how healthy Elder Mo is, I'm afraid he won't be able to wait that long. I have to give him the chance to watch the child grow up." And, speaking of Elder Mo, she thought about how he had yearned for a great-grandson for so many years. In the end, let alone a great-grandson, even his own grandson and granddaughter-in-law were too busy to return to the Mo family to accompany him. Thankfully, the old man was always open-minded and did not make things difficult for her. Otherwise, he would have raised his walking stick and smashed the Yew Garden's gates. Furthermore, it was not that she did not want to have children. It was just that she had never thought that she would have children. If you don't want it, then wait a few more years. There's no rush. The man's hand comforted her head. Or, if she really did not want it, he could accept it. He just did not say this. Jinwon's heart moved. Because of what he said, and because of the image of Mo Jingshin holding the child and feeding it with a bottle in front of her mind. When Xiatian gave birth, her family's little police officer was really a classic example of a tough man with tender emotions. Outside, He was definitely a high-ranking military officer. At home, the scene of him changing the baby's diapers was really shocking, including the scene of him holding the baby and feeding it with a bottle. If that face was M.O. Jingshan, she suddenly looked at M.O. Jingshan's face, which was inches away from hers. It was hard to imagine how Great Boss Missouri looked when he held a child. If he could treat her so well, after having children, he would most likely become a nanny, right? So, when she had a miscarriage, how could his heart not ache? It was just that he was too good at concealing all his emotions and never revealed them. It was just that no one saw the heartache he purposely hid. Perhaps it was because Jinwan's expression was too serious, or perhaps it was because he really did not plan on doing anything to her when she had just woken up and did not want to affect her recovery. The man took several deep breaths on her body, kissed her between her breasts, and suddenly released her. Jinwan raised her eyes to look at the man who moved away from her. Actually, it's not that I can't give birth. M.O. Jingshan's eyes were filled with her reflection. Hearing her words, he smiled mildly and helped her up from the sofa, letting her sit by his side. She was about to tidy up her messy clothes when the man pulled her into his arms. Wan, and the man's voice was so gentle that Jinwan couldn't help turning to look at his handsome face. The man slowly said, "Back then, you were pushed out of the car by Su Shui on the Los Angeles highway. Because of the severe fall, you miscarried. Feng Ling said that you went through emergency treatment at that time. Was it very painful?" Jinwan's face was calm, and she simply leaned her head on his shoulder. Under the shadow of the light, her long eyelashes fluttered like a fan. No matter how painful it was, it couldn't be more painful than the pain you felt when you used your own body to block that giant truck. I always believed that although you were seriously injured in that car accident, you still survived in the end. It must be our baby who died first. He begged God to let his father accompany his mother for decades more and not be separated by death so early. Or, Jinwan raised her hand and casually played with the buttons on his shirt as she had done a few days ago, as if she was used to leaning on his arms even though she had woken up. She said softly, "At that time, he just knew that the trajectory of my life needed to be changed and that it was not suitable for him to be born at that time. So he obediently went back first and waited for the right time to meet us again. It must have been very painful. I heard that you had a lot of bleeding in the emergency room, and because you were pregnant, you couldn't have an anesthetic injection. The pain made you faint again and again." Back then, for Jinwan, it was not just physical pain. She clearly knew that the child could not be saved. While suffering in human pain, she also had to worry about M.O. Jingshan, who was being rescued at the same time. All the tribulations in life seemed to find her in an instant, as if all the pain she had experienced in her previous life gathered together at that moment and was on the verge of exploding. And after that incident, he also pushed her away with his own hands. It must have been painful. That was why she was unwilling to bow her head, even after learning the truth. But no matter how stubborn she was, it was true that she loved him, and it was also true that she could not let go of him. It seemed to be very painful. For a period of time, when I touched my stomach, it was flat, and I was not used to it. But at that time, your parents were worried sick about you, and I didn't want them to feel pressured, so I never said it. I just sent you a text message when I was very depressed, once a day. I've read those text messages. And you said it. I know. I read every one of them. I know. Seeing that she seemed to have forgiven him and did not want to argue about such a trivial matter, M.O. Jingshan held her slightly cold little face and bowed his head. Wan, I apologize. Jinwan's hand that was playing with his buttons involuntarily tightened because of his words, and then she grinned. To show your sincerity, you have to spend more time with me on vacation. MN Group has been under Xia Tian's management. If I suddenly go back now, if she knows that I've recovered, I bet she can't wait to throw the company back into my hands. It's rare for me to relax, and I don't want to go back so early. He never expected that this little woman would put forward such a condition. M.O. Jingshan's elegant and deep brows moved slightly. That's it. Yeah. The great M.O. Jingshan don't lack anything, and neither do I. For so many years, the only thing we lack is to put down our work and really come out to relax together. Besides, after we got married, we didn't have a honeymoon. Now, this is just a compensation for me. Jin-won said matter-of-factly. The man smiled. All right, it's up to you. Then let's play for another 2 months, Jin-won said as she calculated the time. First, we'll play here and in Argentina for a few more days, and then we'll pass by the United States. I'll go to New York to watch a fashion show, and then I'll go to Los Angeles to see the place where I studied when I was a teenager, and then I'll go to London to show you the place where I lived in England for 3 years and the old side of my company. And I'll go to Ireland, Greece, and Egypt. In this way, is 2 months not enough? If 2 months is not enough, then 3 months. If 3 months is not enough, then a year. I'll accompany you all the time. And is it really okay to let the big boss of Shine Group accompany me on vacation everywhere? Chapter 721. She had been carried out of the pool by Mo Jingshin. Right now, she was still wrapped in a messy bath towel and swimsuit, and her wet hair hung down behind her shoulders. But after all, Jin-won had just entered the formal recovery period and still needed a little more rest. Swimming was a very physically exhausting exercise. After speaking only a few words, she leaned into his arms, feeling a little sleepy. Mo Jingshin carried her into the bathroom, let her take a hot shower, change into pajamas, and then came out. However, when she came out, he didn't know whether this little woman had gotten used to being in his arms for the past few days or just wanted to cling to him. Mo Jingshin was originally waiting on the sofa for her to come out and help her dry her hair, but when Jin-won came out, she directly sat on his lap and continued to maintain the posture she had before taking a shower. It seemed that she planned to lean on his arms and sleep. Just like before, many times when she couldn't sleep at night, or was excited or acted coquettishly, he would hold her like this to coax her sleep. Although she was already awake, it seemed that she had accidentally developed this habit. It was a habit that Mo Jingshin was very satisfied with. He stroked the woman's half-dry hair. Are you going to sleep now? Your hair hasn't been dried yet. I've rubbed it with a dry towel for a long time. It'll be dry in a while. You don't need to dry it. Jin-won leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep. The man stroked her head. Seeing that she was really too sleepy, he didn't stop her. Jin-won leaned into his arms in the same position as a few days ago, as if she could fall asleep quickly in this position. He heard the little woman's breathing gradually become even, and she was no longer as nervous as a few days ago when she fell asleep or even occasionally woke up. However, she still habitually grabbed the buttons of his shirt with her hand. This action did not change. Mo Jingshin suddenly remembered the year when he had just returned from America, when he found out that Jin-won was the girl who rescued him from the Los Angeles River, and when he met her for the first time in High City. It was at a medium-sized business banquet in Sea City. There seemed to be light in her eyes, and she was cunning and quick-witted. Unlike other young ladies who looked around and compared with others, she was blindly drinking champagne and desserts in the corner. As long as no one was paying attention, she would steal a glass of wine to drink. In front of others, she obviously looked like a noble lady, but behind others, she didn't have any manners at all, but had a unique cuteness. The second time he met her, she didn't know about it. She was kidnapped by the G family's rival in the mall, but at that time, she didn't know what happened. She was blindfolded, tied up, and carried away in an inconspicuous van. He sent someone to rescue her and rescued her from the van before she was almost taken out High City's highway. However, she, who was only 19 years old at that time, was already frightened. It was not convenient for Mo Jingshin to show up, so he didn't remove the black cloth from her head. She didn't know whether the people who took her away were other kidnappers or someone else. Even when he carried her to the car and patted her comfortingly, she still tensed up in his arms nervously. The fear of a little woman made her originally soft body tense, as if every part of it was about to break. In the end, he couldn't bear it and said lightly, I was sent by your father to rescue you. It's not convenient for me to show up, but I'll send you back to the G family immediately. Don't be afraid. After saying these words, he didn't know if it was because his tone was too calm, but he could clearly feel her body gradually relax. However, after relaxing, she couldn't help trembling. Her hand inadvertently patted on the buttons of his shirt and tightly gripped them, as if this action could give her a sense of security. Later, even when he sent her back to the police station near the G family, she still didn't say a word. After all, it was not convenient for him to show up at the G family's home and could only send her back through the police. He also had to report her kidnapping to the police station. Otherwise, the G family was likely to encounter the revenge of this kind of business enemy. Back then, why did he insist on marrying Jinwan? When he learned that the young lady was kind to him, he could have used other methods to repay her. He could have also helped the G family's business rise to a higher level, allowing her family and her life to be happier. However, when his grandfather suggested the marriage between the two families, he only thought that it was fated. Furthermore, he didn't hate Jinwan. In fact, he had always remembered the fact that the young lady didn't even know the difference between a first kiss and artificial respiration. If they were fated to be together, he didn't mind marrying her and teaching her well. However, when he truly made up his mind to make her Mrs. Mo, it was this small incident that she might have long forgotten or perhaps even didn't know it had anything to do with him. At that time, Jinwan's entire body had shrunk into his embrace, trembling. Her hands had unconsciously gripped him tightly, holding on to him helplessly and stubbornly, refusing to let anyone hear her cries. Perhaps it was because he suddenly wanted to hold her in his arms to comfort her that he changed from letting nature take its course to personally opening the Mo family's doors to welcome her into his life. Jinwan had really fallen asleep. Mo Jingshan placed her down gently and stood up to bring the hairdryer to gently dry her hair. He then waited for her to adjust to the heat on her head and blow dry all her hair before carrying her back to bed to sleep. The next day, Jinwan's birthday. The moment she opened her eyes, she realized that she was 25 years old. The moment she opened her eyes, she smelled the fragrance of noodles. Jinwan got up and went out. As expected, she saw that Boss Missouri had prepared breakfast for her. It was a simple bowl of egg noodles, which could also be called longevity noodles. On this island, although there were ordinary ingredients, there weren't many of them. There weren't many that tasted good either. Although it was simple, the smell was very fragrant. She couldn't help but walk over. She did not stand on ceremony and picked up the noodles to eat, as she said, "Usually, I always want to eat seafood. In the end, after coming to this island for a few days, I realized that eating too much of it makes me sick. It's not even as appetizing as these simple dishes. If this was a bowl of seafood noodles that I made, would you still eat it?" The man asked in return. Jinwan took a bite of the poached egg and the noodles while thinking carefully. She replied, "Of course I would eat it. So, the only problem lies in whether or not I personally made the food." The man smiled at her. "Eat it. I'll accompany you out after you're full." It seemed like this was indeed the problem. Chapter 722. Jinwan had thought that Mo Jingshan was going to take her out for something, but it turned out that he had really booked a cake-making workshop in advance, and all the staff were off today, leaving only a very famous dessert chef in Argentina to help. Previously, he had promised her that he would take her out to make cakes. After all, she was not sober at that time, so she did not remember it. However, he had kept in mind and had even arranged it in advance. Although Jinwan could cook, she really did not know how to make cakes. However, she remembered that Mo Jingshin had personally made more than 20 cakes for her overnight, and each of them looked very beautiful. She had tasted some and found them delicious, although she had ruined many of them. So, was there anything this man did not know how to do? Was there anything that could stump him? Jinwan stood in the production room, wearing the apron and clothes that the dessert chef had prepared for her. It was pink, and there was also a hat. After putting it on, Jinwan could see her reflection in the window as she passed by. She looked like a real, pink and tender dessert shop attendant, quite down to earth. On the contrary, Mo Jingshan did not change his clothes. He was wearing a white shirt and light-colored trousers. Earlier, when he passed by this street, many foreign young girls could not help but secretly glance at him. This man was dressed all in white today. He looked clean, handsome, and did not look like a man who was almost 30 years old at all. He was so eye-catching that Jean Wan kept standing in front of him to block his face, but she could not block the eyes of those women. At this moment, she saw this man standing in the production room, helping her with the cake. She looked at the man's rolled-up shirt sleeves and revealed a small part of his strong arm. She glanced out again and saw some young girls quietly leaning against the transparent window, and looking in, she felt a little jealous. Her husband, who attracted so much attention wherever he went, could not be hidden. Today, he was dressed like a living Prince Charming. An old Prince Charming who was almost 30 years old. He was indeed eye-catching. Now that Jean Wan was dressed like this, those women who kept peeking inside probably thought he was the boss of this dessert shop or some distinguished customer, and she was just a dessert shop attendant accompanying him. Now that she was dressed like this, it further confirmed their thoughts. They did not even glance at her, but were all staring at the handsome man who could even make desserts inside. However, they were just looking outside. When she was in school, she and Xiatian had also peeked at good-looking boys. It was not illegal to look at them like this, but now Jean Wan's heart was surging with jealousy. She simply turned around and walked into the production room behind with the cream she had just beaten, which was also only separated by a transparent glass. Mo Jingshun, who was concentrating on making the cake for Jean Wan, felt something was wrong. There seemed to be someone following behind him. Except for a few days ago, when she was a little muddle-headed and would hug him from behind when he was cooking, Jean Wan, who usually would not wander behind him like this, had been following him closely like a sesame seed on a sugar cake. When he turned to go to the oven, she followed him. Wherever he went, she would go. Her eyes were shining brightly. Every time he turned back, she would try her best to attract his attention, as if she could press all the stars in the sky into her eyes to attract his attention so that he would not notice the group of people peeking at him outside. Mo Jingshen casually took the matching cream, chocolate, and so on that the dessert chef handed over. Jean Wan stood by the side and watched him intently. She did not look at the cake, nor did she learn how to make it, but only looked at him. Mo Jingshen returned to the workbench. Jean Wan was tired of standing. Relying on the fact that she was still recovering and could be considered half a patient, she moved a stool and sat opposite him. At the same time, she picked up the extra cake that had been cut off and took a few bites. It was very sweet. The cut-off part tasted perfect, not to mention the unfinished cake in front of him. The onlookers outside probably found that there was something between Jean Wan and the extremely handsome man inside. After all, she was so clingy, but the man was not impatient at all. He even specially asked the dessert chef to prepare some delicious food for her to eat, lest she was hungry or bored. Although she was dressed like a waiter, she did not look like one. It was not until they saw the man smear the cream on Jean Wan's nose that the women outside finally understood and left resentfully with a pained expression. Jean Wan raised her hand to wipe the cream off her nose, then sat there with one hand supporting her face and continued to watch him. In fact, she did not know what kind of man Mo Jingshen was. It could even be said that she could not even figure out what kind of husband Mo Jingshan was. She had seen him wearing a suit in the company when he had meetings with elites from home and abroad. Sometimes he was cold and unapproachable, but he was so swift and decisive that it was impossible to predict what kind of decision he would make next. Sometimes he would talk and laugh with people who he rarely praised, but that handsome expression hid a sense of propriety. He never opened his heart to others, and he was a calm and unruffled superior. She had also seen him change into a comfortable shirt or homeware. His slender figure and clean, warm aura were always refreshing. His fine black hair was on his gentle brows. When he looked at her, there was never any hidden warmth in his eyes. Every time he looked at her, she couldn't resist it. She had also seen how decisive he was when he was bathed in blood in Cambodia. She had seen how he had endured silently and cooperated with 11 base without eating for many days. She had seen how intimidating he was when he held a gun. She had seen how he had lost his mind and almost shot that person because she had almost been defiled by that Cambodian. She had seen his many faces. Mo Jingshen, this person, seemed to be hindered by his identity as the eldest grandson of the Mo family. Or perhaps it was because of his responsibility and the constraints of the family, but he was always able to control his identity and emotions very well. In her memory, there were very few times when he lost his mind, but the few times he lost his mind seemed to be related to her. Jinwon did not eat the food that the dessert chef brought her. Instead, she ate the leftovers of the cake that Mo Jingshin had cut off. After all, this was made by him. Even if the extra pieces were cut off, she could not bear to throw them away. Mo Jingshin glanced at her contentedly sitting there eating the cake and sighed with a smile. He said that he wanted to learn how to make a cake on her birthday. It was more like he made it for her. Chapter 723. It wasn't that eldest Miss G did not participate in making the cake. At the very least, when they were decorating the cake, Jinwon could be considered to have come up with a plan. Halfway through, Jinwon refused to remain idle. She took the opportunity to smear a lot of cream and melted chocolate sauce on Mo Jingshin's body. The man's haute couture shirt was slightly wrinkled by her, and there was a lot of cream stuck on his body. Most of it was white, the same color as his shirt. There were also some other colors. Under his helpless expression, he appeared even more disheveled. Aside from Jinwon, no one could imagine that there would be a day when Mo Jingshin would be bullied by a woman to this extent. He did not even dare to retaliate. This shop's ingredients for making cream and cake are all very good. The taste is also sweet, but not greasy. Jinwon licked the remaining cream on her fingers and turned to tease the man who was disheveled by her. Did you come here in advance? Otherwise, how would you know that this shop's homemade cake would be so delicious? Didn't you insist on making the cake with me? Mo Jingshin began to undo the buttons on his shirt. If I didn't find a shop that suits your taste, with your temper, who knows how many more thorns you would find to make things difficult for me. Do I look like someone who would make things difficult for you? Mo Jingshin had already unbuttoned 3 buttons on his shirt. However, because this was still the bakery and there were passers-by outside, it was not convenient for him to take it off. He glanced at her. What do you think? She looked at the beautiful shape of his collarbone as he unbuttoned it, and the arm that was revealed under his casually rolled-up sleeves. The hem of his shirt was also loosely tied around his waist, but in her eyes, it became a sexy curve. Oh, what a feast for the eyes. Jinwon took the opportunity when the dessert chef left to wrap her arms around his neck and hang herself on him. Naturally, cream was smeared all over her body. She tiptoed and planted a kiss on his cheek. When we were in Tea City, did you personally make those 21 cakes one by one like this? But they were all wasted by me at that time, and you didn't even say that you were the one who did it. She looked at his narrowed eyes and felt remorseful for what she had done in the past. But I still haven't learned how to make a cake today. I originally planned to make you 30 cakes when you were 30, but I guess this plan can only be put on hold. I'd better change to another way. He clearly knew that this little woman was deliberately playing tricks. She just didn't intend to make any cake, but found a bunch of shameful excuses for herself. Mo Jingshin's gaze darkened. He held onto her waist. Meanwhile, the reckless Jinwon continued to nag incessantly. Today's birthday is enough. I'm not a child, nor is it some special anniversary or year. Spending a holiday with you on this island is the best birthday present for me. I don't want anything else. To show that she was not that shameless, Jinwon kindly added, but to show your sincerity, you can, hey Mo Jingshin, put me down. This man, who was used to seeing the world, was indifferent. He even freed a hand to steady her waist, causing her to hurriedly climb onto him. To show your sincerity, don't force me to sleep on the sofa tonight. Otherwise, even on the sofa, I'll still eat you up. His lips brushed against her ear, making a flirtatious sound. The last part of his voice was a little upturned and a low chuckle. You know, when I don't intend to touch you, even if I hold you to sleep, I'll at most put something good in my pants. I'll never touch you, but if you force me, I don't care if you're in the recovery period or not. If you really can't, I'll be gentle. And when she heard that he would put something good in his pants, Jinwon's face had already turned red. When she heard his next words, she buried her face in his neck. How could she be so silly at that time? How could she ask such a question? The Diary of the Dessert Chef. The legendary Mr. Mo specially brought his wife here to make a cake to celebrate his beautiful wife's birthday. The entire shop was closed, and I was the only one left here to accompany him in making a cake. Perhaps it was because making a cake wasn't that difficult. Otherwise, why would Mr. Mo become more energetic as he worked? Later, I went outside to retrieve something. When I returned, I saw that Mr. Mo and Mrs. Mo's bodies were covered in cream, but the cake was undamaged. It seemed like the couple had used the reserve cream to have a big battle. She didn't know if it was because the weather on the island was too hot, but there were a few mosquitoes that had flown in. Otherwise, why would there be a few red mosquito packets on Mrs. Mo's neck? The air conditioning in the production room was turned on just right, and the hygiene was very good. Usually, even a fly wouldn't be able to fly in. Was it because the mosquitoes were too small, so they flew in? To express our shop's apology, I specially went upstairs to bring out the special mosquito repellent I usually brought with me and offered it to Mrs. Mo. I also loudly expressed my sympathy for the hateful bumps on her body and my hatred for the mosquitoes that could actually fly into this room. I didn't understand why Mrs. Mo would suddenly glare at Mr. Mo with a flushed face. When I turned to look at Mr. Mo, he had a serious expression on his face as he continued to decorate the birthday cake in front of him. Perhaps the cake was more important than the mosquito bumps on Mrs. Mo's body? We stayed on the island for another 3 days. On the afternoon of the third day, because she would be leaving for America tomorrow, her second destination was New York. She also planned to go to the place she used to study in Los Angeles. After all, she hadn't been there on her previous trips to Los Angeles, so she stayed in a room to study the specific route for the next few days. She was planning where to go first, then where to go, and then where to go. In just a few short days, they only occasionally ate the various delicacies provided by the hotel. Of course, that excluded the raw and cold seafood. The rest of the time, he personally cooked in the kitchen of this suite. To satisfy her appetite, Jinwan had gained at least 2 pounds. Mo Jingshin had just received a call from the company. She had nothing to do in the room, so she got up and went downstairs. She sat on a lounge chair by the pool and looked at the iPad in her hands. She planned the vacation route and checked the customs of the various places she wanted to go. Chapter 724. At night, the aroma of barbecue wafted out from a barbecue buffet area at the back of the hotel, filling the cool sea breeze with the smell of barbecue. Jinwan turned to look at the faint smell from a distance. She saw the red bits of meat scattered on the ground in the distance, creating a lively and beautiful scene after the barbecue. Jinwan stood up and moved closer. There was a family of foreigners, about a dozen of them, who had come to the island for a holiday. They had specially booked the only area in the hotel that allowed barbecue. When they saw Jinwan, they were very hospitable. She thought she was just a traveler staying in the hotel, but when the waiter by the side reminded her that she was the wife of the owner of this island, they were even more surprised and invited Jinwan to eat with them. The family was very hospitable. Jinwan's English was very fluent, and it did not affect her communication with so many people. In the end, as they ate and chatted, she got high and couldn't help but drink 2 cans of beer. After all, this was the last night on the island and the first stop of their holiday. Jinwan was in a very good mood, and as soon as she was in a good mood, she couldn't hold back her bottom line. Naturally, he forgot the promise he made 3 years ago that he would not drink less, and even not drink with unfamiliar people. The side of the pool downstairs was empty except for the iPad placed on the recliner. Jinwan's figure was nowhere to be seen. Mo Jingshin picked up the iPad on the recliner and heard the sound of people eating and drinking and the smell of barbecue nearby. He guessed that Jinwan had not eaten barbecue for a long time and was probably attracted by the smell. As expected, when the waiter outside saw him come down to look for Jinwan, he came over and said that she had gone to the barbecue area. By the time he arrived, Jinwan had already gulped down 2 cans of beer and was chatting happily with a bearded man in his 30s. It was unknown what they were talking about, but the bearded man laughed heartily and handed a can of beer to Jinwan. Jinwan did not reject him and opened the can with a caw sound. She was about to drink when she suddenly sensed someone's gaze. She paused and turned to glance at the entrance of the barbecue area. The moment she saw the man standing under the cold moonlight and watching her indifferently as she prepared to drink, Jean Wan's movement stiffened. She had been a little high earlier, but now she was abruptly sober. Right now, she was a recovering patient. She either pretended to be weak or said that it hurt here and there. In any case, she bullied him endlessly and then found an excuse to show weakness so that he wouldn't fight back. Now, she even dared to drink alcohol. Ahem, I have something to do. I'll go. Thank you. Jean Wan greeted the family with a smile and nodded politely to them. At the same time, she told the waiter to bring them more seafood, meat, beer, and other things. The barbecue would be put under her and M.O. Jingshin's names, so they didn't have to pay. She then stood up and walked over. When she approached M.O. Jingshin, she heard the man's mild voice. You came here to eat barbecue and drink beer while I wasn't paying attention? Jean Wan, I smelled it and came over. I couldn't help myself. M.O. Jingshin glanced at him again. Didn't you say your stomach hurt in the afternoon? It doesn't hurt anymore? For the past few days, every time this man pressed her down on the sofa and kissed her, she would take the opportunity to pretend to be sick. At this moment, she unnaturally raised her hand and scratched her ear. And it doesn't hurt anymore. Well, it's good that it doesn't hurt. The man glanced at her again, took her hand, and turned to leave. Seeing that he didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing the matter, Jean Wan was slightly relieved and obediently followed him back. Fortunately, she had eaten quite a few skewers of barbecued meat just now. Otherwise, she would probably be very hungry now. Just as they were about to return to the room, the man held her hand in the elevator with one hand and put the other in his trouser pocket. He glanced sideways at her. Did I starve you? No. If you weren't hungry, why would you freeload off others? Isn't he barbecuing? If you want to eat barbecued meat, you can tell me. Is there anything I can't satisfy you? You just had gastritis a few days ago. Let's just eat something normal or light. You can't eat barbecued meat or anything like that. I only want to chat with him and ate a few skewers. M.O. Jingshin glanced at her again. Seeing that Jean Wan's gaze was very sincere, he did not say anything more and brought the little woman back to the room. Originally, Jean Wan thought that this matter was just a small interlude. However, when M.O. Jingshin went to prepare dinner, she had just finished showering when she smelled the scent of barbecued meat. She walked out while drying her hair. When she entered the kitchen, she saw that on the stove in front of Boss Missouri, there was a small barbecue equipment that the hotel staff had brought in. There were various meat skewers, shrimp skewers, vegetable skewers, chicken skewers, and other essential ingredients for barbecuing. The smell was even more fragrant than the skewers she had earlier. Jean Wan's hand, which was holding the towel, froze on top of her head. She stared dumbfoundedly at the back view of the man dressed in a white shirt who was grilling skewers for her in the kitchen. However, the fragrance of vegetable porridge wafted out from the rice cooker by the side. This meant that he still planned on sticking to a light diet for a few more days. However, in order to not treat her unfairly, he specially barbecued meat for her and let her eat her fill. It would be a lie to say that she was not touched. Jean Wan walked in. She looked at the skewers of fresh meat and various ingredients before turning back to look at the man. I can't eat so much by myself. The man did not turn back. He was currently sprinkling seasoning on the skewers. He calmly said, Eat as much as you can. Eat until you're full. Otherwise, you'll have to freeload off others. Jean Wan was embarrassed. She was only freeloading off a meal. How did she offend him? It's fine if you're just freeloading off. Just a few skewers of meat is enough to make you lower your guard. You even dare to accept alcohol from anyone. Jean Wan, only then did she realize that earlier, when he went to look for her, she seemed to be chatting with that family's 30-year-old son. She was talking about what he had seen and heard, as well as some of his experiences studying in China. That was why Jean Wan was chatting and laughing with him for so long. It seemed like Boss Missouri had misunderstood. Jean Wan held back her laughter and did not explain. She stood by his side and stared at the vegetable skewers that were already done. She anxiously asked, Can I have a taste first? The man glanced at her and did not reply. Chapter 725. Seeing the little woman's greedy appearance, M.O. Jingshin said, You're really useless. However, he still casually picked up a skewer of vegetables that was no longer hot and fed it to her. Jinwan smacked her lips in satisfaction, saying that it was delicious. She then contentedly turned to change her clothes, preparing to eat the rest of the food that Boss Missouri had personally roasted. The result of eating too much at night was that she could not sleep no matter what. Although the 2 cans of beer that Jinwan drank did not make her drunk, it made her more energetic. After eating the barbecue, she took a shower to prevent the smell of barbecue from covering her body. She then paced back and forth in the room for half a day, digesting the food for a while before sitting down. Because she had eaten too much earlier, it was mainly because Boss Mo's barbecue skills were exceptionally good, especially the seasonings that he had prepared. If they were sold as barbecue seasonings, many barbecue shops would most likely pay a high price for them. After all, they were truly delicious. After much difficulty, she could finally lie down. Jinwan tossed and turned on the bed, unable to fall asleep. She was most likely thinking about her journey and plans after returning to America. She was slightly excited, but also slightly reluctant to part with the slow life on this island. Mo Jingshin had been by her side the entire time. However, as she lay down, he sat against the headboard. In his hands were several documents that he had just printed out. In order to accompany her to sleep, he had specially printed out the electronic versions. It was convenient for him to accompany her while not affecting his work. Still not sleeping? Hearing the little woman turn over again, Mo Jingshin glanced at her. It was indeed time to sleep, but she just could not. Jinwan placed her head in his embrace. I can't sleep. Do you have anything you want to say? Or is there something on your mind? Mo Jingshin held her hand, placing it on his body. He half sat up, allowing her to use his body as a pillow. The belt of his nightgown was not tied very tightly. Following his collarbone, she could faintly see the perfect lines of the man's chest and abdomen through the gap. I'm thinking, if we stay outside for too long, will it be bad? Get to the point. His hands formed a subtle arc by her side, cleverly encircling her in an embrace. His dark eyes fell into her eyes, but it seemed like he was abstinent. He didn't want to do anything, but he domineeringly wrapped her in his scent. I think it's better to shorten the trip. Wouldn't it be too heartless of me to leave the company to Xiatian and pretend to be sick? You have a conscience with everyone else, but you like to play the role of an ingrate in front of me. Mo Jingshin's hand brushed against her cheek. His tone seemed to be smiling, but it also seemed to be gritting his teeth. I'm being serious. I've already taken you away from Shine Group and occupied you for several months. Wouldn't it be too much to continue to occupy you? Yes. Mo Jingshin unhurriedly grabbed the belt of her nightgown that was gradually loosening. Are you done? Can I sleep now? Then shouldn't we go back earlier? The man did not answer and instead said, I don't think your condition is as serious as you say. You even dare to drink. What else can't you do? That's not what I'm talking about right now. Before she could finish speaking, she realized something was wrong. The pitiful belt around the waist of her nightgown was nowhere to be seen. His fingers had already reached under her open collar. His palm seemed to know her body like the back of his hand. It seemed like he was carelessly moving around, but it caused her to tremble slightly. Jinwan instantly entered a guarded state, alarm bells ringing loudly. Didn't you say you want to sleep? She did not have time to struggle and was already pressed under his arms. I don't see that you're sleepy. This is because you need to vent the alcohol. Why don't I accompany you to vent it? Even at this time, he did not forget to show off his black-bellied nature. It was clearly what he wanted to do, but he still blamed it on her drinking. To deal with a little heartless person like you. As expected, I can't be too soft-hearted. Why not make breakfast for you tomorrow morning? Let Boss Missouri have a good sleep. I definitely won't make you wake up early to make breakfast for me again. The arrow was already on the bowstring, but the prey still wanted to struggle on its deathbed. I can't wait. The tip of his tongue circled down her neck, leaving behind a decadent red mark. She instantly released an uncontrollable whimper. Amidst the broken words, it was already impossible to distinguish his name. His voice reverberated by her ears. Sometimes it was as though he was far away, and sometimes it was as though he was close by with warmth. She closed her eyes, as though she had fallen into the deep and boundless ocean in his eyes. Old rules, pay with your body. The man's voice was so heavy that it could easily capture her soul. Usually, when Mo Jingshin wanted to let her go out of consideration for her, even when she could no longer endure it, he would have an astonishingly strong self-control. Even if he had to take a cold shower for an hour, he would definitely not make things difficult for her. However, when this man did not intend to let her go, she would always be helpless against his ferocious plundering. Earlier, when he called her a little white-eyed wolf, she felt that she was slightly better than him. However, in the face of his sudden kiss, it was instantly crushed. It turned into dust and flowed away, melting into his bottomless abyss. The man easily pried open her teeth. It appeared as though he was attacking fiercely, forcing her to retreat. Even her breathing became erratic. However, his hands were extremely patient, as though he was afraid of scaring her. She could only grip his sleeves tightly, struggling to not let herself fall. After a long time, the man finally let go of her, as though giving her a chance to breathe. However, in a moment of carelessness, the man's hand had already reached for her waist. His hot palm seemed to carry a low fever, burning her lumbar spine and making it numb. When his slender, well-jointed fingers slid across her skin, there was a different kind of pleasure. His fingertips were like a swimming fish, going anywhere. In the past, every time she resisted and resisted, it was because of the knots in her heart that should not have existed. Now, she could only say that she was almost frightened by her own passion. She did not dare to face herself, who actually missed him so much. But Gu Yuang had already bloomed into a gorgeous flower. She couldn't hide it even if she wanted to. She swayed her vines and bound her heart towards him. Jin Wan's iPad was thrown on the bedside. At this time, the screen suddenly lit up and the news of Shine Group's new cooperation project popped up. Although Mo Jingshin did not personally go back to participate, as the CEO, he would definitely put his photo on the news. In the photo, he was still immaculately dressed. The collar of his shirt and suit were tightly fitted. From the corner of her eye, Jinwan caught a glimpse of the photo of the news that had lit up on the screen. She immediately had an evil thought. She looked at the man who was currently doing things to her body and bit down on his Adam's apple that was rolling up and down. Chapter 726. However, the result of this bite was that Mo Jingshin reached out to hold the back of her neck, lowering his head to kiss her harshly. Due to her provocation, his kiss became more and more forceful and domineering. It was so passionate that it was almost rough. His fingers slid down bit by bit, pushing aside the hem of her dress and rubbing against her thighs. The numbness began to spread from his fingertips, and soon, she was completely limp. Her body rose into the air, and she subconsciously hooked her legs around his waist. Mo Jingshin, what are you doing? However, in the next moment, her entire body was carried onto his body. It was clear that she was on top. He chuckled softly. Because she hadn't completely sat down and was still half in his arms, the man's breath entered her ears, knocking against her eardrums and invading her brain. It intertwined with the desire in her mind that even she couldn't suppress, flashing like sparks of fire in a haze. Don't you dislike being bullied by me? I'll give you a chance to be a queen. Jinwan. The next morning, when Jinwan woke up with a sore back, Mo Jingshin was already dressed neatly and reading the morning newspaper delivered by the hotel in the living room. She walked out in her slippers, yawning as she glared at the well-dressed man who acted as if nothing had happened. Beasts, dressed like a beast. Mo Jingshin seemed to have heard her silent criticism. He lowered the morning paper and looked at her with his dark eyes. Both of them had gone to bed very late, and Jinwan was sleepy even though she had slept for at least an hour longer than him. But the man's eyes didn't show the slightest tiredness. Breakfast is on the table. Eat quickly. We're going to the airport today. Got it. Knowing that they had to catch a flight today, he refused to let her off last night. It was not enough to end at once. He insisted on making her faint several times before he stopped. She opened the plate on the table. Inside were the crab dumplings that the hotel had specially made for them. Mo Jingshen needed to nourish his stomach for the next few days, but Jinwan didn't need to. She thought she was already satisfied with the barbecue he made for her last night. She didn't expect that she would have such authentic crab, roast soup dumplings to eat before she left today. However, the process of making this thing was so troublesome. He must have informed the hotel and asked them to deliver it early in the morning. Jinwan had been tormented by the man for an entire night. In the second half of the night, she felt that the barbecue she had eaten had been completely digested. She had been hungry for a long time. Right now, she couldn't care less and directly sat down to eat. Didn't you say yesterday that the hotel is near the sea and the morning air is very cold? Can't you put on your clothes? Mo Jingshen looked at the nightgown hanging from her shoulders and could not help but sigh. He reached out to help her adjust her collar. It wouldn't have mattered if she hadn't pulled it, but with this gentle tug, a ray of spring light was pulled away from her collar. Between her snow-white neck and collarbone, light red spots were scattered all over the places he kissed last night. The marks that could not be hidden were written into her body, honestly recording all the joy of love last night. What are you trying to do now? It's so early in the morning, and I'm still being raped by you while eating. Mo Jingshen, you cultured scum. Jinwan's body instinctively went on alert. She, who was still chewing on the soup bun, slapped away his hand that was protecting her collar. You definitely can't continue. We'll be late for the plane. What are you thinking about? Mo Jingshen's handsome brows moved slightly. In the end, he only smiled and picked up the coat hanging on the back of the chair to cover her shoulders. Hurry up and eat. We have to catch the plane. Oh, the alarm was lifted. She could eat in peace. Also, he thought for a moment before turning back. Recently, the weather in Los Angeles has been very cold. Don't wear too little, especially clothes that reveal your shoulders. Recently, he had watched Jinwan swim more often. Mo Jingshen increasingly felt that he wanted to hide every part of this little woman's body. Even if it was just an ordinary spaghetti strap dress, he could not let her wear it. After all, it was really too easy to attract a man's attention. Oh, Jinwan continued to eat. When he was not paying attention, she softly muttered, "Miser." The last minute of Jinwan's life on the Argentinian island was stretched by Mo Jingshen to the point that it felt like a century. They passed by the dessert shop in the departure hall. Jinwan wanted to eat sundaes and ice cream, but Mo Jingshen refused to let her eat anything cold. Instead, he bought ice cream-flavored donuts for her. They passed by the various unremarkable specialty shops in the departure hall, which also had a variety of exotic styles. In the end, when they were finally about to board the plane, they did not take the first-class entrance, but stood at the back of the crowd. Rather than saying that Mo Jingshen was completely complying with Jinwan's wishes, it was more accurate to say that Jinwan wanted Boss Missouri to interact with the common people. After all, it seemed that every time she returned to Los Angeles, something big happened. But after all, Shine Group was here, and so was the Mo family of Los Angeles. This was also the place where she studied when she was a teenager. So even though Jinwan had almost been traumatized by Los Angeles, this place was still indissoluble in her life. She still had to travel around High City and Los Angeles. She didn't know that Mo Jingshen had relinquished his power in the underground arms trade and was no longer in charge of it. She just thought that Atuda and the other troublesome people had been completely dealt with, and that was why he returned to Los Angeles so peacefully and no longer had any trouble. As soon as they returned, Mo Jingshen's mother, Ms. Wan Zhu, got the news that Jinwan and the others had returned to Los Angeles. Although Mo Xiaoza and Ms. Wan Zhu were old and no longer in charge of the company's affairs, they had worked hard for Shine for many years, so they must still be in close contact with the company. The person in charge of this matter must have told them that Mo Jingshen had gone to Argentina and that Jinwan and Mo Jingshen were together. So less than 2 days after returning to Los Angeles, Ms. Wanzhou came to ask Jinwan to go back to live with the Mo family in Los Angeles. She still called Jinwan daughter-in-law. Even though they hadn't seen each other for 3 years, she was still familiar with them. On the contrary, Mo Jingshin had no intention of letting Jin Wan go back with him, nor did he intend to let Jin Wan leave his sight. When returning to Los Angeles, he had to go back to Shine's headquarters to deal with some important affairs, so Jin Wan simply stayed in the break room in his office. Chapter 727. Qin's sighting happened to return to the United States these days and was caught by Mo Jingshin to examine Jin Wan. From the beginning, he knew that Jin Wan's head injury wouldn't be a big problem after Dr. Wendell's operation, and the remaining blood would be completely absorbed by the brain. But Jin Wan's recovery speed was indeed very fast. When he came to check on her, Qin's sighting couldn't help saying, "Sure enough, he didn't take a vacation to look after you at home for nothing." This kind of inseparable way not only greatly stimulates your dependence and familiarity with him, but also allows you to stay in a safe environment. Such a peaceful way of recovery is good for you. At least this headache will be mostly relieved. Will you still have headaches in the future? Jin Wan asked. At present, after all, it hasn't been long since I recovered. In the short term, I may have headaches due to strenuous exercise or symptoms such as car sickness and plane sickness. I may not be able to bear the pressure of high altitude and some ordinary bumps. Usually, I won't have any headaches, but after a certain period of treatment, I will slowly recover. Don't worry. Qin's sightings words were always reliable. Jin Wan didn't need to worry, and now she didn't need to. Since Ms. Wanzhou learned that Jin Wan and Mo Jingshin had returned to Los Angeles, even if she couldn't bring her daughter-in-law home as she wished, she still came to the company to talk to Jin Wan every day. Jin Wan was still hiding from the people of Immerse Group, especially from Xiaotian. She still pretended that she had not recovered from her illness and tried to stall for as long as she could. So when there was no company business coming to her, she was really bored. Being dragged around by Wanzhou to go shopping and chat with her was a good way to save her boredom. When passing by a photography studio opened by a Chinese in Los Angeles, Wanzhou suddenly tugged at Jin Wan's cuff with bright eyes. Daughter-in-law, when you and Jingshin got married, didn't you take wedding photos? Jin Wan also looked in the direction of the photography studio. They did take wedding photos, but they also didn't take them. At that time, she didn't know much about the man she was going to marry. It was only because of Ji Hongwen's persuasion and for grandfather Mo's sake that she agreed to let the photographer take a few photos of her at home with the wedding dress he had chosen for her. Although there were wedding photos of her and Mo Jingshin, they were all single photos. The only one that was in the same frame was photoshopped. After all, she did not remember seeing Mo Jingshin before the wedding. After that, those photos were never displayed in the U Garden. After all, she was unwilling to display them in the beginning. Later, because they were all taken alone, she felt that it was meaningless, so she never took them out again. So when Wanzhou took her into the studio and offered to book a set of wedding photos for the two of them, Jin Wan did not refuse. In fact, she was also very curious about the process of taking wedding photos. Furthermore, she had never taken this kind of photo with Mo Jingshin in her previous lives, so she more or less had a little desire. Although Mo Jingshin had been busy these days in Los Angeles, he only took a look at Jin Wan when Wanzhou arranged for him and Jin Wan to take wedding photos. Seeing that Jin Wan seemed to be looking forward to it, he didn't refuse. After asking about the scheduled time, he told his secretary to clear the photo shoot time and not to arrange other work, which obviously meant that he agreed to accompany Jin Wan to take the photo. In fact, the wedding photo shoot was scheduled for 2 days later. That day, Mo Jingshin drove Jin Wan there in person, without needing Ms. Wanzhou's nagging to remind him. After all, his wife was his. As long as Jin Wan cared about him, as long as she wanted, he would spend 10 times more energy and time to accompany her to make up for all the regrets he had. At least, he couldn't leave any regrets, in case this little woman always found reasons to be unreasonable with him. This studio was specially chosen by Ms. Wanzhou. It was said that an old friend's great-grandfather had studied abroad more than 100 years ago and then settled in the United States, where he opened a studio here. This studio had been open for more than 100 years and was now a very famous studio in Los Angeles. Most of the people who came here to take photos were Chinese. Of course, some foreigners who wanted to take photos in Chinese classical style would also come here. Recently, Wanzhou also wanted to take good care of the two of them, so when she booked the photo shoot, she took the initiative to choose 4 sets of clothes for them in advance. Jinwan trusted Ms. Wanzhou very much, so she naturally wore whatever she had. The first 2 sets of her white wedding dress and Mo Jingshan's suit were very normal, and the photos were also very happy. The third set was purely in Chinese classical style, the kind of bright red wedding dress, and also very beautiful. Based on Madame Wanzhou's age, no matter how fashionable she was, the things that caught her, I would definitely follow the rules. She would not come up with all sorts of novel ideas like young people. However, she had to admit that although these styles were conventional, each one was more festive than the last. It made Jinwan feel as though she was not married to Mo Jingshan for long. Instead, it was as though she was preparing for her wedding. There were several times when she changed her clothes and came out to take photos. Under the thin layer of foundation in her bridal dress, her face would turn red. And the fourth set. Before entering the fitting room, Jinwan's mind had been set on the clothing of women of the Republic of China in the anti-Japanese war films, or those young ladies from wealthy families, or those singing at night in Shanghai. She tried on several sets of cheongsam in a row. Although they were beautiful, Jinwan could not show much style. Especially with Ms. Wanzhou watching from the side with a smile, she was even more stiff. In the end, she either dressed up as a young lady in a standard photo studio style, or dressed up as a prostitute with the taste of a good woman. Facing the mirror, she twisted her body with her hands on her hips, stretched out her slender legs, and tried to throw a kiss and a wink. It was not that Jinwan did not know how to dress seductively. It was not that she had never been sexy before, but Ms. Wanzhou was by the side. She wanted to act very flirtatious, but she still held back a little. Her movements were also slightly stiff, so for some reason, she looked very much like a child secretly wearing an adult's clothes. In the end, Ms. Wanzhou thought that she was tired from taking photos today and did not want her to be too tired. So she simply gave up on this classic and sexy look and decided on a scholarly student's outfit. In the end, very good. After putting it on, Jinwan felt that she could directly participate in the Yellow River Cantata. Jinwan looked at herself in the mirror with 2 braids and felt a little discouraged. She wondered if she had really become too thin recently. She could even wear sexy clothes to look like a good woman. In the end, she could only dress up like this. No wonder Mo Jingshan said she was thin every day and told her to eat more every meal. Jinwan's eyes lit up. Chapter 728. Jinwan looked at herself in the mirror. She was dressed like a student of the Republic of China. Although she was beautiful and Mrs. Wanzhou praised her by the side, Jinwan still complained that she was too thin. She touched her waist and made a plan in her heart. From night onwards, she would have at least 2 dinners, a plate of vegetables and a plate of meat. She thought as she walked out of the changing room, wanting to call the makeup artist over. Not far behind the changing room was a small balcony. Occasionally, there would be staff smoking there. Jinwan knew that Mo Jingshan's changing room was not far from there and subconsciously glanced in that direction. In the end, she saw that the small balcony was covered with a warm sunlight weave, and there was a tall and straight figure standing against the direction of the light, which made her feel a little strange, but also so familiar. His shoulders were draped in a thick, dark trench coat. Around his collar was a circle of fur that indicated his status. Under the sunlight, it shone with the unique luster of animal fur. Above his black hair was a wide-brimmed hat of the same color. A long, light-colored scarf hung from his neck all the way to his waist, swaying gently with his movements. She saw him turn his body slightly. The dark gray 3-piece suit accentuated his waist into a charming curve, and the elegant bronze-colored metal buckle became a low-key decoration. Under the love of the light, the retro patterns on it could be seen clearly. He tightened his black leather gloves. The lighter in his hand, which was originally meant for decoration but could also be used, made a crisp sound. Then he lowered his head slightly and lit a white cigarette. Jinwan rarely saw Imo Jingshan smoke. She only remembered that when she first returned from London and saw him in High City, he seemed to smoke a lot at that time. However, it gradually decreased. She had also heard from Shunmu that Imo Jingshan did not like to smoke. Even if he did, it was only occasionally. However, in the 3 years she was not around, he was indeed a heavy smoker. That lighter was clearly just a prop for taking pictures. The cigarette must have been a staff member who saw him dressed like this and felt that he should be handed one to Imo Jingshan. Thus, Imo Jingshan took it, and because he was waiting for her to change, lit it up. At this moment, she saw Imo Jingshan, his side profile with the cigarette in his mouth. When he lowered his head, his Adam's apple moved slightly. Between the cuffs of his white shirt and his black gloves, his wrist that was not wrapped in any cloth. The collar he clasped tightly, and the finger that gently loosened his tie. It was as though they had turned into walking hormones, ruthlessly firing several shots in her heart, killing her on the spot. Jinwan was so absorbed in watching that she accidentally bumped into the cleaning tools by the door of the changing room and fell to the ground with a clang, shattering all the fantasies she had about pouncing on Big Boss. Imo Jingshan seemed to have heard the noise. He extinguished the remaining half of the cigarette and narrowed his eyes to look at her. When he turned around, his trench coat and scarf formed a perfect arc, and the lines of tension were thrown into her heart. She only saw his eyes under the brim of his hat and black hair. They were very deep, and because of this rare outfit, they looked very unruly. It was as though he had turned into the Republic of Imo Jingshan, and the Imo of her. Imo Jingshan of Imo of Jingshan Imo. He had easily snatched away her 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Yet, when the man looked at her, he walked over after a while. Imo Jingshan sized her up. It was clear that he was suspicious of the style of Jinwan's clothes. "Are you going to go on a cruise?" Jinwan touched her Republic of China student attire and her 2 braids. She could not help but say with a sullen expression, "Recently, no matter how much I eat, I can't gain any weight. I've been too skinny for the past few months. I should be dressed like a singer. It's perfect for a business tycoon like you, but right now I can't support that kind of clothes." Imo Jingshan held back his laughter. He looked at Jinwan, who had turned into a literary young man because she could not dress like a singer. He then glanced at the light blue student attire and long skirt she was wearing. "This is not bad. Who told you that a business tycoon must like a singer? My stomach has just recovered. It's not good to eat too much fish and meat. Plain porridge and side dishes suit my appetite." Plain porridge and side dishes? Have you forgotten how sexy I was when I first came back from London and was pursued by all kinds of men? She was still a little thin since she was injured and in a coma. When her figure returned to its perfect state, let's see if he still dared to say she was a plain porridge and side dishes. Jinwan was not willing to be a plain porridge and side dish. She turned back to the dressing room and planned to change into a cheongsam. Imo Jingshan waited at the door for a moment. Because Jinwan said she wanted to choose her own clothes, he asked the staff to go out first. Wanju also came out to find the water dispenser to pour a glass of water for Jinwan. Only Jinwan was left in the room. The man glanced at the dressing room, which was slightly closed by Ms. Wanju. He frowned and reached out to help close the door so as not to expose himself. However, the moment he approached the door, he caught a glimpse of the scene inside. He kept his hand on the door handle and did not move. His little woman. She reluctantly changed into the faraway songstress clothes. From the beginning, her body was exposed, and then she put on the clothes. Then, she stood in front of the mirror and kept posing. She threw coquettish glances and pouted to show all kinds of sexy and charming expressions. Perhaps she felt that it was not enough, so she pulled down the clothes on her shoulders and continued to pose with her thighs exposed in front of the mirror. Perhaps the 2 braids on her head were too strange, so she untied her hair and stood in front of the mirror with her long hair hanging loose. So how satisfied was she with the clothes he was wearing that she was so dissatisfied with herself because of the contrast? The little woman pinched the cloth on her waist from time to time, wondering if she should use a clip to clamp a piece of cloth behind her so that she would not look too thin. After posing like this for a long time, Jean-Wan was tired of blinking and finally glanced at the door out of the corner of her eye. However, she suddenly saw the man outside the door who had been watching her for a long time. She screamed and turned to rush over to close the door, but she ran too fast. She was wearing indoor slippers for changing clothes, so she staggered and fell forward. The man outside the door opened the door unsurprisingly and caught the little woman who threw herself into his arms. When Jean-Wan stumbled out of his arms, looking at her disheveled hair, Imo Jingshin smiled slightly. The way you threw yourself into my arms is more seductive than any other style. Dash. Chapter 729. When it was finally time to take a photo, Jean-Wan still wore her outfits and stood together with Imo Jingshin. In the end, the experienced photography teacher smacked his lips and was especially satisfied. His mouth was full of praises of a perfect match. His steady tone added the color of age to this studio that had been open for more than 100 years in Los Angeles. Mrs. Wanzhou was all smiles by the side. When the photo shoot was over, she rushed over to hold Jean-Wan's hand and asked her if she was tired, as though she was afraid of exhausting her daughter-in-law. Perhaps it was because Mrs. Wanzhou had been too excited for the past 2 days that she couldn't keep her mouth shut, or perhaps it was because she had received Imo Jingshin's tacit approval that she told Elder Imo about their wedding photo shoot. Thus, Elder Imo took advantage of this excitement and actually flew from High City to Los Angeles the next day. According to Elder Imo, it had been at least 10 years since he had taken a plane, and it had been 17 or 18 years since he had been to America. This time, in order to find his granddaughter-in-law, he was willing to risk his life to come to Los Angeles to reunite with them. He would stay in Los Angeles for a month before returning to High City. The television in the living room of Shine Group's CEO's office was broadcasting news. Behind the host, there were people walking to and fro. Thanksgiving was very lively in the West. The small smiles on the passers-by's faces represented a certain festive atmosphere that slowly seeped into the night air. The familiar sound of pots and pans colliding gently came from the spare kitchen of the break room, and a pleasant aroma of food wafted out. Jean-Wan sniffed, and today it was sweet and sour spare ribs. She raised her head and secretly glanced at the door. Warm light shone through the crack of the door, gently passing through the dry air and shining into her eyes. The tall and straight figure who had just left a certain high-level meeting in this building 2 hours ago was holding a spatula and carefully placing the dishes on a plate. The overhead light of the kitchen and the aroma of the food slowly intertwined in her consciousness, wrapping him up and gently sending him to the bottom of her heart. The faint scent of grass on his body was mixed with the smoke of the world. She saw the nape of his neck under his black hair, which curved beautifully under the light. This great boss Missouri chef Imo, who usually cooked whatever she liked to eat, had started to patiently cook for her because she had recently started to crave the taste of Chinese food again. Even though he would always complain that the smoke from Chinese food would make the house filled with smoke, her dinner would always include a few of her favorite dishes. As for the sweet and sour pork this time, she guessed that when she returned to the Mo family in Los Angeles 2 days ago, Mrs. Wanzhou had made a plate of pork ribs, but she was too embarrassed to eat too much in front of Mo Shaoza. She only picked up 2 pieces and ate the food in front of her. It was precisely because she clearly wanted to eat but was too embarrassed to do so. She clearly did not mention this matter, but Imo Jingshin clearly saw it. While her thoughts were still wandering, he had already walked out of the kitchen. In her eyes, the sight of him holding a plate was more tempting than the steaming hot sweet and sour pork ribs. "What are you looking at?" He freed a hand to pat her head as she approached. "Go wash your hands." There was a faint fragrance on his hand, carrying the warmth she was familiar with. It was as though this extremely ordinary office break room was able to block out all the disturbances of the world. The festive atmosphere of the Westerners outside had also transformed into a warm and ordinary day by his side, peaceful and lasting. After the meal, "Come with me to the Mo family tonight. Someone has come," Mo Jingshan suddenly said, as Jin Wan placed the last piece of pork ribs into her mouth. Jin Wan abruptly coughed. She almost spat out the pork ribs she had just finished eating. She glanced at him in surprise. Isn't Grandfather Mo here? Who else is there? Grandfather hasn't been to America for almost 20 years. It's rare for him to come. His old friend from back then heard the news and naturally came to visit. He placed a glass of warm milk in front of her, scolding her for being useless with his gaze. But they're having a reunion with their old friends. Do they need us to go over? As Jin Wan spoke, she carefully pushed the glass of warm milk to the side. She wanted to push it further away when he was not paying attention. She had eaten a lot earlier. Right now, there was no space left in her stomach to hold the milk. It was the one who said that in the future, you have to eat 2 bowls of rice, 2 bowls of vegetables, and 2 glasses of milk for every meal. You've only reached half of your goal, and you can't eat anymore? He noticed her small movements. Are you still complaining that you're too thin? Jinwan glanced at the milk that she had pushed further away. Tonight, she had eaten a bowl and a half of rice and an entire plate of sweet and sour pork ribs. Mo Jingshun had barely eaten, allowing her to eat them all. How could she have such a big stomach? However, this milk had been warmed by Boss Missouri with good intentions. Jinwan could only bring it back. She pretended not to notice the satisfied smile on his lips and drank more than half of the milk. The so-called reunion of Elder Mo's old friends was indeed different from what Jin Wan had imagined. She had thought that it would be like what she had seen on television, where a group of old people in their 70s and 80s would stand together and sigh over the haste of life. Or perhaps they would cry because they did not know if they would ever meet again. But it was a group of old men sat together, drinking tea and chatting. Each of them wore a smile on their faces. Even Jin Wan felt as though she was bathed in a spring breeze. However, she had no interest in this group of old men's mahjong table. It could even be said that she could not understand the way these old men thought. They had only met once in almost 20 years. Their after-dinner entertainment was not to sit together and cry about the past, but to play mahjong. Furthermore, there were 2 mahjong tables. Just like right now, at the other table, Elder Mo and his daughter-in-law, Madame Wanju, were playing mahjong with 2 other old men. At this table, it was Mo Shaoza and Mo Jingshin. Jinwan watched as Mo Jingshin took off his coat. He was wearing a fitted, fine wool white sweater. The V-shaped collar revealed a gray shirt. He loosened his collar and shifted his gaze from the mahjong tiles to Jinwan, who could not wait to find something to do. He used his eyes to indicate for her to sit by his side. With so many people around, how could she have the nerve to sit so close to him? Earlier, this group of old men had not stopped mocking the 2 of them. Chapter 730. In addition, she had never seen Mo Jingshin so patiently accompanying his family and relatives. Back when they were in the Mo family in High City, Mo Jingshin had always been gentle and distant toward the group of relatives who came to suck up to the Mo family's thigh. Those people all thought that he disdained interacting with family and friends. But now, it seemed that it was only because those relatives who tried to cling on to Grandfather Mo had their own motives, and Mo Jingshin really did not want to spoil them. But now, he was simply helping Elder Mo maintain his image. Mo Jingshin had given him enough face. It was rare for him to patiently participate in this kind of after-dinner entertainment to accompany the elderly while playing mahjong. Or perhaps, Mo Jingshin was usually too busy. Recently, because he was accompanying her to recuperate, even if he occasionally returned to Shine Group, he would only attend some important meetings. Usually, he would spend more time with her. It was rare for Boss Missouri to have such free time. Seeing that Jin Wan was bored to death watching by the side, Mo Jingshin touched a tile and continued to lock his gaze on her. Jin Wan continued to shake her head. Although she really had nothing to do watching everyone play mahjong, she was considering if she should help the helpers pour tea. But previously, when she wanted to help, Mrs. Wanju had glared at her, indicating that there was no need for her to help and that she should rest well. Seeing that Jin Wan was still standing there, Jingshan narrowed his eyes and played the tile in his hand. Seeing that Jingshan planned to give up after this round to accompany her, Jinwan chose to sit by his side to prevent the others from being disappointed. The man then calmly leaned against the back of the chair, indicating for Jinwan to help him touch the tile. After all, Jinwan was Jingshan's wife. Everyone present was an elder. Seeing this young couple's behavior, they only smiled and did not have any objections or dissatisfaction. They only nagged, "Tisk, tisk, it's really good to be young." Under everyone's gaze, Jinwan reached out her hand. In fact, her mahjong skills were very ordinary. The last time she played mahjong was in Jing City, and it was only with Xiao Lui's help that she managed to win a few rounds. How much did Jingshan trust her to actually let someone like her, who was not very good at mahjong, touch the tile for him? She picked up a card and touched it in her hand for a long time, but she couldn't figure out what card it was. She had no choice but to obediently hand the card to him. He's already allowing his wife to draw the cards so calmly. It seems like Jingshan is going to win this round. Anything she draws will win. The one speaking was an old man. Jinwan felt her cheeks heat up. She could let Jingshan do whatever he wanted at home, but in front of a group of old people and relatives, even if she accidentally showed a little affection, she couldn't help blushing, and even the mahjong tiles in her hand became warm. She hurriedly stuffed the mahjong tiles into Jingshan's hands, turning her head away in embarrassment. Jingshan flipped his long fingers over the tiles. His face was expressionless as he casually pushed them down. Flowers blossomed on the bar. Everyone was shocked. "This daughter-in-law seems to be very popular with you." Everyone started to talk at once. Jinwan's face was so red that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Thus, when everyone left in the middle of the night and returned to their rooms to rest, Jinwan's face was still red from being teased by the old men. The main reason was that these old people were used to seeing the world. After playing mahjong and drinking tea at night, when they couldn't fall asleep, they liked to talk about young people. They even discussed who would be the god-grandfather of Jinwan's child in the future, and the ranking of the god-grandfathers. Jinwan felt that there might be something wrong with her brain a while ago, which led to some unresolved problems in her brain. Otherwise, how could she, who is usually very strict, become so careless after this illness? For example, 2 nights before returning to High City from Los Angeles, there was a company reception arranged by Shine Group. Not to mention her identity as the head of MN Group, she had to attend as Mrs. M.O., who had been publicly acknowledged time and time again. However, whether in the M.O. family's bedroom in Los Angeles or in the 300-square-meter lounge next to Shine Group's CEO's office, these spacious spaces resulted in her often rummaging through cabinets and cabinets to look for things that she didn't know where she had left them last time. It was almost December. Although it was not Shine Group's year-end reception, it was rare for Jingshan to attend it in person, so it was naturally more grand than usual. Jingshan, have you seen the white shawl I bought a few days ago? Jinwan rummaged through the closet in the bedroom and shouted angrily at Jingshan, who was outside. "I put it in the lounge after I bought it. Where did it go?" "How would I know?" CEO M.O., who was neatly dressed, looked at his watch. There was still half an hour before the reception began. "Don't rush. Take your time. We're running out of time." There was a clattering sound in the room. Jingshan thought that Jinwan was going to tear down the closet door. It was not too late. It was only a 5-minute drive from here to the reception, which was enough for Jinwan to continue looking for things. Now, the only reason why she was impatient was that she had been looking for this shawl for more than an hour and still hadn't found it. "Can't you change to another one?" He watched as she ran from the master bedroom to the secondary bedroom. He suddenly seemed to have thought of something. He paused for a moment before walking over. When Jinwan opened the secondary bedroom's closet door, it was empty, yet it seemed to be filled to the brim. A man's suit was neatly hung on the left, along with several neat shirts. By the side, there was a leather coat with an intricately patterned bronze-colored buttons. It was paired with a cane and a wide-brimmed hat. It looked slightly familiar. Wasn't this the business tycoon's outfit that Jingshan wore that day in the Chinese photo studio? She heard the man's footsteps and the door closing behind her. When she turned back, she met his deep black eyes. "Mr. Mo, do you want to explain?" She thought that he had an indescribable fondness for this kind of thing and couldn't help but deliberately glance at the closet. The man was unperturbed. "I asked someone to custom make a new set based on that one. The quality of the clothes there is too poor." Not only was he unperturbed, he even leisurely added, "Don't you like it a lot?" This time, it was Jean Wan who was speechless. She stared at the man's expression, which could not be any calmer. She recalled her infatuated expression when she faced the business tycoon of the Republic of China, Mo Jingshan, and her lips couldn't help but twitch. Chapter 731. Aren't you going to the cocktail party? What are you doing? Jean Wan's body instinctively sounded the alarm again. When she turned around, she saw that he had locked the door to the break room. She couldn't help but ask, "You're not going to the cocktail party? I'll change my clothes for you to see." The expensive necktie was casually thrown to the ground, and then he began to unbutton his shirt unhurriedly, so that you don't have to think about it every day. Jean Wan, she did remember it. After all, Mo Jingshan usually wore normal clothes. He was either a strict CEO style or a clean and refreshing home style. It was rare for him to dress up deliberately, and it was only for the photo shoot. However, the style that time was really shocking. At that time, she even regretted that he would only wear that kind of clothes once in his life. She didn't expect that he actually noticed her regret at that time. She watched as the man's fingers moved down bit by bit, from his collarbone to his chest, and then to his slim waist. His undulating lines and perfect figure were faintly discernible under the white shirt. When a man changed into that set of clothes in front of her, Jean Wan was stunned. If one were to say that his appearance at the photo studio was enough to shock them, then right now, when Mo Jingshan wore this set of clothes made of perfect material, it completely brought out the incomparable aura that a man was born with. Seeing that the little woman's gaze was fixed on him, Mo Jingshan's lips curved slightly. "Do you like it very much?" Jean Wan nodded blankly. Perhaps because she was becoming more and more honest recently, she no longer held back her temper and said things that went against her heart. Her obedient appearance was especially moving. Before she could speak, the man had already carried her up. She was still wearing the gown that she had just changed into. In order to find a matching shawl, she had walked around the room for a long time. She had been wearing it the entire time, but when she was carried up and then placed on the soft white bed, the gown's trailing covered her body. This was a white gown, and the trailing was covered with layers of beautiful white chiffon. The white chiffon fluttered in the air with her movements and then scattered, dyeing a pure white. It was like a flawless brocade. His lips and hands were familiar with every part of her body. He explored her body with ease, and soon she was completely defeated. Before the last line of reason collapsed, she heard him whisper in her ear. His voice was dark and hoarse, and there was a hint of sluggish panting at the end. "There's no need to look for the shawl. Just change it to a new one later." Jean Wan, now, even if he didn't want to, he had no choice but to change. Wait a minute. She suddenly realized that it was almost time for the banquet and wanted to remind him. "What are you waiting for?" He put his hands around her disobedient waist. Jean Wan couldn't help but cry out, almost covering his soft sigh of satisfaction. Just as Jean Wan was about to lose her mind and forget the passage of time, her cell phone suddenly rang. Jean Wan originally wanted to ask him to stop, but when she saw the man reach out to pick up the phone, her remaining rationality rang in her ears, and she instinctively felt that something was wrong. "Yes, it's me. Speak." He put his index finger to his lips and gestured for her to keep quiet. Jean Wan did not expect his actions and covered her mouth to prevent herself from making a loud sound. "Mo Jingshan, are you 3 this year?" "I have time now. Take your time." Although he was still speaking into the phone, his gaze kept moving around her body. His naked desire was about to tear her apart and eat her up. His palm held her cheek, and his slender knuckles probed along her lips and her mouth. She couldn't help but let out the sound that had been suppressed in her throat. The voice on the other end of the phone was slightly muffled, and a sense of tension that she had never felt before stimulated her brain. Furthermore, this man's playful and lustful gaze moved back and forth on her body, moving such a familiar scene between the sheets in a broad daylight. It actually caused her 3 souls and 7 spirits to tremble. Jinwon even felt like she was a young girl who had just experienced the ways of the world. She was completely at a loss. However, in her heart, she hoped that the highest pleasure from her soul would engulf her. On the other end of the phone, the man continued to report with a serious expression. She fell onto the bed and was almost forced to cry. She turned her head and bit down on the corner of the blanket. Her suppressed voice had long been broken by the man's teasing. "Mo, Jingshun." She heard her own voice was hoarse and choked as she called out his name. She could not take it anymore. By the time he finally hung up the phone in satisfaction, Jinwon had already suffered a crushing defeat. Her tears mixed with her messy hair covered her face. Because she had been biting down on the corner of the blanket for a long time, her lipstick had rubbed against the edge. She appeared somewhat messy and disheveled, but it also added to her seductiveness. Jinwon had always known that the pleading and weakness that she unintentionally revealed was the most effective aphrodisiac in the eyes of men. In just a moment, her entire body seemed to be brought together by his scent. Every cell in her body was engraved with his name. Those 3 words seemed to have seeped in her flesh and bones, sinking into the deepest part of her body. It was as though it could not be erased. As a result, they arrived at the hotel 2 hours late, although they were originally supposed to arrive in half an hour. Most importantly, Jinwon was picked up from the bed in an exhausted state by the man. He gave her a bath and helped her pick out a suitable set of clothes. Since they were in a rush, Jinwon did a simple hairstyle that looked very good. Just like that, Mo Jingshin directly brought her to the venue of the reception. When they arrived, a group of people from Shine Group and their business partners swarmed over. Jinwon had been tormented by this beast in human clothing until she was dispirited. When she arrived, she maintained a suitable smile. When the crowd gradually dispersed, she found a seat with fewer people and sat down. She was so tired that she did not want to speak. If it weren't for the fact that she was attending as the representative of MN Group today, she most likely would have directly fallen asleep on the bed. She definitely would not have come. However, after all, MN Group's face was here. She had worked so hard to support the company, and it was rare for it to have such an occasion in Los Angeles. It would not be appropriate for her to not come. But it was true. Good. Tired. Most importantly, not only did she not find her shawl, but he had also forcefully destroyed the gown she liked. Mo Jingshin, this beast. Beast. Dash. Chapter 732. Jinwon was too quiet at the cocktail party tonight. Many people came to see her because they heard that Mr. and Mrs. Mo would come in person. But apart from seeing Jinwon when they arrived, they didn't pay much attention to where she was. At this time, Jinwon was sitting on the sofa in the corner. Her back was sore and her legs were weak, so she didn't want to move. Mo Jingshun knew what state she was in, so he put his coat on her shoulders and asked her to sit there to rest. As a result, the others didn't see where Jinwon was, but when the people nearby saw her sitting there lazily, they just thought she was not feeling well or something, so they greeted her when they passed by. Jinwon also raised her hand politely to say hello, with a polite smile on her face. Jinwon didn't pay much attention until 2 young girls in the distance quietly looked toward her and whispered to each other. Jinwon didn't pay much attention to them, but she just turned to get a glass of red wine and went back to sit on the sofa. When she looked back, she saw that one of the girls in a pink evening dress was approaching Mo Jingshun with a blush. She didn't know what she was saying to Mo Jingshun, but it was not hard to see that she adored him. Jinwon glanced over there. There were many women who adored Mo Jingshun, so she was not surprised now. She saw that Mo Jingshun didn't even look at the girl, but was talking to a man next to him, looking indifferent as if he didn't see the pink peacock-like girl next to him. After talking to the man next to him, he ended the conversation and walked away from her without a trace. It seemed that she was the daughter of a business partner in Los Angeles. Seeing that Mo Jingshun didn't even look at her, The girl was a little disappointed, but didn't dare to approach him again. She turned around and resentfully returned to the other girl. The two of them seemed to be discussing something, and their eyes kept glancing in Jin-Won's direction. Then they suddenly approached her, thinking that Jin-Won hadn't noticed them. When they came over, they seemed to approach her unintentionally. Then the two of them picked up the red wine on the long table beside Jin-Won, chatted with each other while drinking, and then continued to approach her. When she saw that one of the girls was about to spill the red wine on her, Jin-Won sat still and said lightly, "Even if you spill the red wine on me and force me to find a place to change my clothes, even if I'm not sitting here, Mr. Mo won't look at any woman except me. I advise you not to try your luck. Otherwise, even Mr. Mo won't let you off easily. After all, no matter how rich the Mo family is, this dress worth more than 1,000,000 yuan was spilled by the red wine." He has to give her an explanation. The girl who almost spilled the red wine on her stiffened and immediately steadied the glass. She glanced awkwardly at Jin-Won. Jin-Won didn't dare to spill the wine on her. She didn't dare to do so. However, Jin-Won sat there indifferently, with a casual smile in her eyes, but her eyes were cold. She had no intention of forgiving them for their misdeeds, just because they were young. The two girls were indeed young and not very scheming. They just wanted to talk to Mo Jingshun, but seeing that Mr. Mo was too cold, they thought it was inconvenient for him to communicate with other girls because his wife was here, so they took the opportunity to send Mrs. Mo away and see if Mo Jingshun would talk to them. However, to their surprise, the two girls looked at each other awkwardly and put down the wine glasses. "Mrs. Mo, you're thinking too much. I didn't hold it steady just now. Fortunately, Mrs. Mo reminded me. Otherwise, I might have accidentally spilled it on you. I'm sorry." One of the girls turned to Jin-Won and apologized awkwardly. Jin-Won's expression remained unchanged. She was neither cold nor indifferent, nor did she put on a condescending air. She just looked back at them indifferently and said flatly, "I can understand the young lady's yearning for love, but in your eyes, Mr. Mo is already a married man who has been married for many years. I suggest you change the direction of your yearning. It's not a good thing to want to hook up with another man's husband at such a young age." The two girls immediately blushed. We didn't mean that. You'd better not." Jin-Won gently curved her lips, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "There's nothing wrong with being simple, but under normal circumstances, I won't be polite to those who have such thoughts. After being married for so many years, I've seen all kinds of women. Some young girls who are too straightforward can be trampled to death like ants crossing the street. At such a young age, why do you want to make others unhappy and harm yourself and others at the same time?" The two girls looked a little embarrassed. However, this person was Mrs. Mo after all, so they didn't dare to quarrel or do anything else. And Mrs. Mo clearly saw through them, which was why she said such words. In this case, if they continued to argue, they would not be in the right and would definitely be at a disadvantage. The two girls did not dare to say anything more. They looked at each other, stuck out their tongues, and turned to leave quickly, not daring to stay any longer. Jin-Won was not affected by this little episode at all. She still sat in the same place and took a sip of red wine from time to time to kill time. Less than 10 minutes later, Mo Jingshun came back and helped Jin-Won up from the sofa. He whispered in her ear with a smile, "Are you still very tired?" The man's voice was very low and light, and only she could hear it. Jin-Won glanced at him, accusing him with her eyes. Of course, he had tortured her so much before coming to the party. It would be strange if she had the strength now. Recently, he had not stopped almost every night. It was as if he wanted to make up for the pain he had suffered in the past 3 years of abstinence. At this moment, there were people dancing at the party. Mo Jingshun held Jin-Won's hand in the crowd and did not go over to join the fun. He let go of her hand and turned to hold her waist, drawing her into his arms, and lowered his head to look at her. "I heard that Mrs. Mo said harsh words to someone today. If anyone dares to have any thoughts about Mr. Mo, you definitely won't be polite to them, right?" Chapter 733. Mo Jingshin was very satisfied with the news that came out of the two girls' mouths. Jinwan calmly looked at the people in the dance hall and said, "If I were standing here today as the head of MN Group, I might be able to avoid any disputes and protect my company's image. But now I'm Mrs. Mo. Some girls even want to step on my head. Do I look like I'm easy to bully?" How could Jinwan be easy to bully? She had never been easy to bully, but she did deal with things according to the situation and the people. Mo Jingshin smiled in satisfaction. His hand tightened around her waist. With Mrs. Mo around, we can indeed avoid a lot of trouble. Are those little girls who come because of your reputation trouble? I thought Mr. Mo actually likes them very much. Jinwan deliberately teased him. The man's palm stroked her waist, and his voice was so low and husky that only she could hear it. "Don't you know what I like, Mrs. Mo?" Jinwan. She immediately gave the man a reproachful look, but the man chuckled and lifted the coat on her back. "If you're tired, go back and rest early. Tonight is just a formality. You don't have to be here the whole time." Jinwan grunted in response, but she did not leave so thoughtlessly. After all, she was already late. If she left early, it would be inappropriate. She knew this in her heart. As the CEO of MN Group and the wife of the CEO of Shine Group, no matter how much Mo Jingshin spoiled her, she had to be responsible for her words and actions. She used to be the Mrs. Mo that Mo Jingshin doted on, but now she was the Mrs. Mo that could stand side by side with him. Why is life so fortunate to be able to live with the person you love? The memories of two lives are related to you. Jinwan was 25 years old, and Mo Jingshin was 30 years old. A month later, shortly after Jinwan and Mo Jingshin's vacation began, she was called back to High City by Xia Tian to deal with the company's new project, mainly because Xia Tian's baby caught a cold. It was the first time the baby had a fever since she was born, which frightened Xia Tian, who was known as a strong woman in the business world. It was said that at 3 o'clock in the morning, Xia Tian was so anxious that she couldn't fall asleep. She rushed to the hospital overnight and refused to let go of the baby. The doctors in the hospital, on the other hand, had long been used to it. After arranging the fever patches, anti-inflammatory drugs, and so on, they said that it was normal for the baby to have a fever and didn't need to worry, and then left the consulting room. Every time Xia Tian mentioned this thrilling night, the colleagues in the company who had long been mothers would have a common topic. They all said that when their baby had a fever for the first time, they were all frightened. They all said that the baby had a fever and had a fever. But later, they became more experienced, and they were very calm even when the baby had a fever. Half a month after Jinwan returned to High City, she was oppressed by Xia Tian and her colleagues in the company. Every day, she was urged to have a baby. It had only been 2 months since she became clear-headed and recovered. It couldn't be that fast. Jinwan was not in a hurry at all. As time went by, Mo Jingshin's birthday came. Jinwan was actually a stubborn person. She didn't remember many festivals and anniversaries as clearly as other women. She thought about it carefully. It seemed that she hadn't specially celebrated Mo Jingshin's birthday for so many years. So a week before his birthday, she casually mentioned it to Xia Tian and Xiao Ba. But on the day of his birthday, she completely forgot about it. It wasn't until Xia Tian and Xiao Ba took her to the mall to buy things that she remembered it. But it was already the afternoon of the same day. She clearly remembered that when she got up in the morning, Mo Jingshin was the same as usual. It seemed that even he had forgotten about it. But 30 years old was a full 10, and it was also the beginning of a man's most handsome and charming age. If she really didn't celebrate his birthday for him, it would be too unreasonable of her to do so. But as for the suggestion to wrap herself up as a birthday present, she very much rejected it. After all, this kind of thing was really too embarrassing. In particular, under the suggestion of the company's various employees, Xia Tian and Xiao Ba forcibly took Jinwan to the mall and dragged her into a lingerie shop to try on a set of sexy lingerie. And it was the kind with cat ears. What on earth were these two women thinking? In order to make her quickly give birth to a child, they couldn't wait to send her to Mo Jingshin's bed every day, right? She silently hooked the hairband of the cat ears with her index finger and looked at the two women who didn't want to make things worse. Xiaoba, boss, if you really don't know what gift to give him, just sell your body. No matter what, CEO Mo has always been so good to you. If you take the initiative to flirt with him, even if he eats you clean, you won't lose out. Anyway, your husband and wife. If you want to eat him clean, you've already eaten him clean. Jinwan, Xiatian. That's right, that's right. When it's time to make a move, you have to make a move. Tell me, when have you taken the initiative in front of Mo Jingshin? If you deliberately flirt with him, seduce him, do you think the usually calm and collected CEO Mo will directly have a nosebleed? Jinwan. It was possible that she would have a nosebleed. Xiao Ba, boss, you can do it. Xiatian. You can do it, you can do it. Bravely wear it back for him to see. Jinwan. Who could help her chase these two crazy women out? In the end, Jinwan still succumbed to their power and had no choice but to buy the set of clothes back. Originally, she had a business meeting at the company. Xiatian and the others said that there was no need for her to go, but this time, the business partner she had to meet was very important. Jinwan put on a serious expression and insisted on returning home after the business meeting. The matter of celebrating Mo Jingshin's birthday was directly thrown to the back of her mind. And then, the result was, when she returned home, it was already past 11 o'clock p.m. There was still half an hour before Mo Jingshin's birthday party ended. Recently, the two of them had been staying at AO Lawn International and did not return to the U-Garden. She quietly pushed open the door and saw that it was pitch black. She finally released a long sigh of relief in her heart. Although Mo Jingshin had been very busy after returning to High City, he should be able to understand her coming home a little later today. After all, everyone had work to do, although the scope of her a little later seemed a little too wide. Jinwan carefully removed her high heels and tiptoed into the bedroom like a thief. The living room lights turned on. She was startled and immediately straightened up. She happened to see Mo Jingshin standing in the middle of the living room with his arms crossed and a heavy expression. Chapter 734. Why didn't you turn on the lights? Jinwan softly muttered. What do you think? Mo Jingshin was dressed in dark blue home clothes, but did not diminish his imposing aura. How would I know? Jinwan fearlessly replied. After speaking, she buried her head, as though afraid that Mo Jingshin, who had a terrible birthday, would beat her in the next second. What made her feel even more guilty was the equipment she was wearing under her clothes. Earlier, after returning from the business meeting, she was forcefully dragged into the break room by Xiaoba and Xiatian to change her clothes. Then, he came back wearing the clothes he had bought during the day. He only had a white cashmere coat on the outside. While changing, Jinwan's heart was already wailing. Who could tell her? Why was there a collar on this kinky lingerie? Why was there a bell on the collar? These two women, deducting her wages. At that time, she stood in front of the mirror with a red face and indignantly tied the bell around her neck. She then wrapped a thick scarf tightly around her neck to ensure that there would not be any jingling sounds when she walked. But to be honest, right now, she only felt suffocated. His slippers stepped on the wooden floor silently. She could only see Mo Jingshin's slender legs approaching her dangerously. A week ago, you specially reminded me to celebrate my birthday. It's rare for me to remember this day clearly and come back early. In the end, this is the birthday you want to celebrate for me? Mo Jingshin stopped 10 centimeters away from her. His slightly hoarse voice rang above her head, filled with a hint of anger. Without raising her head, she could tell what his expression was like. It should be very bad. That's right, a week ago, she had specially mentioned that he was about to celebrate his 30th birthday. Mo Jingshin said that he rarely celebrated his birthday and did not need to do anything, but she said that he had to celebrate his 30th birthday. Thus, he had remembered this matter. In the blink of an eye, the person who had spent almost all the 24 hours of the day was her. Jinwan wanted to refute, but was forced back by Mo Jingshin's pressing body. It's my fault. I have a business meeting tonight, so she had better obediently admit her mistake. After all, today was the birthday boy's birthday. However, when she decided to lower her head and admit her mistake, Mo Jingshin stared at her neck for a long time. She felt that the great CEO, Mo, seemed to be stunned for a few seconds. He looked at her tightly wrapped cashmere coat with an unclear meaning. But in the end, he still turned to the side and allowed her to enter the house. The air conditioner was turned on in the room, and it was so warm that it even made her feel a little hot. She subconsciously wanted to take off her coat and scarf, but when she thought of the outfit inside, she swallowed her saliva and decided to stay calm. She shouldn't have worn it. She must be crazy to have been encouraged by Xiaoba and Xiatian to wear such a thing. Mo Jingshen closed the door and went to the kitchen to pour 2 glasses of water. The food on the table was already cold. He clearly had no intention of letting her eat. He came to sit by her side and handed her the water. Seeing that she was still wearing such a thick coat and scarf, he asked calmly, "Aren't you hot?" "It's not hot, it's not hot. It's cold." "Ha! Ha ha!" He touched her cheeks that were even redder because of the heat. He raised his brows and was about to say something when Jin Wan subconsciously reached out to cover his mouth. "I'm fine, really." His warm breath landed on her fingers. It was soft. After being husband and wife for so long, Jinwan finally realized that ever since she was reborn and took the initiative to seduce Mo Jingshin, it seemed like this man had always been the one taking the initiative. Regardless of what it was, even on the bed, he always stood in the dominant position. This was the first time she had done such a thing. She could not help but feel a little guilty. The moment her hand touched his lips, she rushed to pull it back. However, the man covered her hand with his, moving it to his lips for a light kiss. He then let her do as she pleased. Jinwan stared at his handsome face in a daze. She was even slightly dazed. Such a good man, a man that so many women drooled over. How did he become her man? "What are you thinking about?" He held her hand. Seeing that she was staring at him in a daze, he used some force to call back her wandering thoughts. "I'm thinking that there's only a little time left before midnight. What should I do to make up for your 30th birthday?" She spread her fingers apart and intertwined them with his. His long, slender fingers felt even hotter against her face. He held her hand and watched her face. He did not speak, nor did he reprimand her for returning too late. Just as Jinwan thought he was about to say something, his other hand suddenly wrapped around her waist and pulled her into his embrace. "It's good that you're home safely. If you were any later, I'm afraid I would have sent bodyguards to your company to search for you." This man was really constantly worried about her safety. He did not plan to pursue the matter of her not celebrating his birthday with him. Jinwan leaned into his embrace, her fingers tracing the lines on his clothes. She closed her eyes to feel his steady heartbeat and softly said, "What could possibly happen to me? Unless someone is drooling over my beauty again." The man chuckled lightly. Outside the window, fine snow drifted down slowly. The room was as quiet as a dream. However, this was a dream. It was 2F* king hot. The clothes and scarf that were too thick for the room made it increasingly difficult for her to breathe. Her eyes seemed to be covered by a thin layer of mist. Even Mo Jingshin, who was so close to her, could not see clearly. She turned her face slightly and rubbed her eyes, trying to rub away the mist. However, it was counterproductive and her vision became increasingly blurry. Mo Jingshin sensed her movements and raised his eyes to carefully watch her reddening face. "What's wrong with you?" To Jinwan's slightly flushed skin, his palm was slightly cold and extremely comfortable. She subconsciously rubbed against it. When she heard his words, she suddenly remembered the clothes she had specially worn for him and immediately bounced up from his lap. "Ah, it's all right, it's all right. I'll go wash my face." After speaking, she immediately carried it into the bathroom. The full-length mirror in the bathroom reflected the woman wrapped in a thick coat and scarf. Her face was crimson, reflecting her dark and clear eyes, making her look somewhat beautiful. She tugged at her scarf. After hesitating for a moment, she untied it and put it in her bag. The bell on her neck jingled as she moved. Listening to the sound, she sniffled and blinked at the mirror. She felt that this was a completely different feeling from the time when she kept winking at the mirror during the wedding photo shoot. One time, she was just doing it for the photo shoot, and the other was for real. Mo Jingshun stood in the living room, hearing the movements inside. He walked over and opened the bathroom door. However, Jin Wan, who had already taken off her coat, was standing inside. She was about to come out when their eyes met. Chapter 735. When Jinwan said these words, it happened to be 12 o'clock. Thankfully, she made it in time. However, the man stood outside the bathroom door, staring at her as she walked out. Jinwan did not have the courage to raise her head. After speaking, she lowered her head and looked at his slippers. She was so nervous that she could barely hear her own breathing. She then added in a small voice, "Happy birthday, Mo Jingshin." Those who don't know might think that my slippers are called Mo Jingshin. There was a smile in his eyes. He raised his hand to rub her hair, chuckling softly. "Look into my eyes." Jinwan reached out to remove his hand from her hair. She raised her head to glare at him. The shyness in her heart was truly unbearable. She could not help but bring his hand to her lips and bite down hard, trying to vent her nervousness. However, the man raised his brows and glanced at her before releasing her. However, he did not let go of her hand. Instead, he carried her in his arms. With a pious expression, as though he was about to open a present, he carried her into the bedroom. Jinwan's face was red the entire time. There was no need to say more. They had been husband and wife for so long. He could easily tell why she was dressed like this, what she was thinking, and how shy she was. The bedroom was slightly dark. Mo Jingshan carried her to the bed and sat down. He placed her on his lap and wrapped his hands around hers, holding them gently in his palms. Jinwan felt that the redness on her face that had just faded was beginning to heat up again. She raised her head to glance at his expression. She suddenly felt that perhaps she was dressed too much like a kitten today. It was rare that this man did not transform into a beast. Instead, he was so gentle and patient, as though he wanted to put her in his eyes and melt her away. Anyway, her clothes had already been changed. The plan to use her as a birthday present was already halfway done. No matter how embarrassed she was, it seemed like there was no need. Jinwan closed her eyes and leaned forward to kiss the corner of the man's lips. Because of her action, Mo Jingshin chuckled. Just as Jinwan was about to move away, he pressed the back of her head to prevent her from leaving. His lips and tongue pressed down on hers. "Did you eat at the dinner party tonight?" His kiss landed on the corner of her mouth. His low, husky voice made her heart tremble. He still did not forget to care about her. Jinwan made a muffled in sound. "I did. Then it's my turn." She didn't react for a moment. When she understood, she was pressed into the bed by the man who was no longer gentle. When Jinwan learned that the floors above her residence in Yuehu Bay belonged to Mo Jingshan, she was not surprised at all. At first, she didn't think of it, but later, she gradually felt that there was such an ability to ensure her safety without being discovered, and there were so many strange coincidences everywhere. After thinking carefully, she guessed it was Mo Jingshan, but she didn't dare to be too sure. When she was about to go out with Mo Jingshan to finish her unfinished vacation, the housekeeper from Yuehu Bay came to deliver the clothes she wanted to take out. She recognized the housekeeper as the one on the 16th floor, and the answer was self-evident. She had questioned Mo Jingshan about this matter. However, Great Boss Missouri had replied indifferently. At that time, there were too many people chasing after her. If he didn't despicably separate those who wanted to be neighbors with her, she would have been cheated away by others before he could do anything. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, he couldn't let it go. Look, even Mo Jingshan himself admitted how despicable he was. Fortunately, Jinwan had guessed it, but she wasn't sure. Now that she thought about it, she finally understood why Mr. Vince had repeatedly applied for the house in Yuehu Bay, but had been rejected. TSK, TSK, TSK. She really couldn't tell that Mo Jingshan was even more shameless than she had imagined. No, she had seen his even more shameless side. What was there to be surprised about? As the saying went, all businessmen were cunning. If Mo Jingshan wasn't shameless or despicable, how could he have become a fearsome existence in the business world? However, when Jinwan checked the house in Yuebei, she also checked the relationship between the house and herself. It turned out that long before she moved in, the entire several floors of Yuehu Bei's properties had been transferred to her name, which meant that the houses worth hundreds of millions of yuan were all hers. At the same time, Jinwan checked the assets under her name, only to find that Ling Xiao Group had ceded part of its assets to her before she came to her senses. Half of Xiao Xinjuan's private property had also been transferred to her name. Although Jinwan didn't plan to accept it, she also asked the legal department and a lawyer to return these things that didn't belong to her. However, before doing so, she counted all the assets under her name, took a screenshot, and sent a photo to Mo Jingshan. Jinwan. Am I now the richest woman in China? The Ji family, the Xiao family, and MN Group's money added together should be enough, right? However, Mo Jingshan's reply to her was, tomorrow, I'll transfer all the assets under my name to you. You'll be the richest woman in China. There's no need to add the word woman. Jinwan. I don't want to. I'll return the Xiao family's assets to them as soon as possible. And I don't need the Ji family's assets. My father can manage the company for at least another 20 or 30 years. I don't want to take on so many responsibilities. MN Group is enough to make me anxious. She didn't need the title of the richest woman. Just the 3 words Mrs. Mo were enough. Jinwan's vacation in London, Greece, Egypt, and all over the world began again. But as soon as she returned from Egypt, she had to stop. Because recently, wherever she went, she vomited. She couldn't hold on any longer and was forced to go to the hospital by Mo Jingshan. It turned out that she was already more than a month pregnant. When she did an ultrasound examination, she found that there were 2 small things in her belly for more than a month. No wonder her morning sickness was so severe. She was actually pregnant with 2. When she saw the 2 small, indistinct images on the ultrasound, Jinwan didn't expect it at all. But the smile on Mo Jingshan's face didn't disappear from beginning to end. At night, when she went to bed, Jinwan leaned against Mo Jingshan's arms. All day long, she would often look at the ultrasound to make sure she wasn't dreaming and that she was really pregnant with 2 babies. When she finally fell asleep, Mo Jingshan stroked her hair and said softly, all that you've lost one day will come back to you in another way. Chapter 736. 1 year later. Ding, dang, dang, dang. In the morning, Jinwan was still dreaming in bed when her phone alarm began to ring. She narrowed her eyes and searched for her phone. When she opened it, she saw the 2 words on the alarm clock, feed. This was an automatic reminder from her phone every morning. The 2 babies needed to be fed 150 milliliters of milk powder or breast milk each after they woke up. The Mo family had specially hired a nutritionist to arrange a daily feeding method according to the weight and condition of the 2 babies. It was said that this method of mixing milk powder and breast milk was very beneficial for the growth of the twins born at the same time. However, this alarm could only serve as a wake-up call for Jinwan. It had been 3 months since the birth of Mo Jinan and Mo Jinning. As long as she didn't have to hold and feed the babies, the family basically didn't ask her to do anything. Mrs. Wanju had specially flown from Los Angeles to High City to personally take care of the babies for more than 2 months. Recently, she had to fly back to America due to some matters. At home, there was a nanny arranged by grandfather Mo, but as long as Annie Chun was around, there was basically no room for others to interfere. The names in Ningning were given by Elder Mo. The old man only hoped that the babies would grow up healthily and peacefully. On the day these 2 little things were born, when he learned that they were a boy and a girl, the old man leaned on his walking stick outside the delivery room and was so excited that tears streamed down his old face. In the first few days, he didn't even sleep. He just sat by the small bed and watched the 2 little guys drink their fill and sleep, not even willing to blink. Originally, when the old man learned that Jinwan was pregnant, he was overjoyed and said that he would love it no matter if it was a boy or a girl. He didn't expect that in the end, this little girl not only got pregnant, but also gave birth to a pair of twins. The old man was so happy that he seemed to have suddenly become 20 years younger. And it was the elder brother. He was born half a minute earlier than Ningning. The two babies look a little small when they were born, but they could eat and sleep well in the past 3 months. They were white and chubby and were especially lovable. Except for crying a few times when they were hungry, they were obedient and never cried at other times. They were so young and didn't know anything. But as long as an adult held them and teased them, the two children would especially cooperate and giggle, which made the whole Mo family treat the two children as treasures and like them very much. Not only the Mo family, but the G family and the Xiao family also couldn't help but come to the U Garden to see the children again and again. Jinwan didn't refuse or stop them. After all, although she had the right to choose her father, she didn't have the right to choose a grandfather for the children. Besides, even if there were 2 grandfathers, it didn't matter. They were both good to the children. When Jinwan was pregnant with 2 babies at once, she suffered a lot during the 9 months of pregnancy. After the baby was born, except for feeding the baby, Mo Jingshan didn't ask her to intervene in anything else and only asked her to rest. So her usual state in the U Garden was Mo Jingshan was either in the study because of work or taking care of the children with Annie Chun. Mo Jingshan even fed the 2 children more than Jinwan. Although breast milk was necessary, the 2 little things were too big and had to be fed with milk powder. Moreover, the 2 little things especially liked to drink milk powder in their father's arms. Every time they drank milk, they would stare at their father with round eyes and smile. But when they drank milk in Jinwan's arms, they ate and slept at the same time. They didn't give her any face at all. Now Mo Jingshan, the global CEO of Shine Group, had become very good at making milk powder for the children. Even Jinwan couldn't control the temperature of the water well and often made mistakes in the order of pouring milk powder and water into the bottle. But Mo Jingshan was obviously much more professional than her. Jinwan could only put on Mo Jingshan's nightgown every day, nestle on the sofa in the U Garden, holding a fruit plate and eating all kinds of nutritious nuts and fruits. Other mothers complained that they were busy and tired after becoming mothers, but since she gave birth to the babies, she was so idle that she was about to go moldy. The company gave her a year of maternity leave, and MN Group was now managed by someone. There was no need for her to interfere at home. Sometimes she looked at her phone. Sometimes she watched TV. Sometimes she looked at Mo Jingshan. Most of the time, Mo Jingshan's mind was on her and the children. Many of the company's unfinished business were sent to the U Garden by Shunmu for him to review. When he finished feeding the children and turned to answer the company's call, he allowed Jinwan's gaze to move from his face to his collarbone and then to his chest. She did not even let go of the joints of his fingers. She stared at him back and forth 800 times. Occasionally, he would raise his head from the company's documents and reports. In the end, under Jinwan's pitiful attack, he gave in and allowed her to hold the children for a while. In fact, the reason why Mo Jingshan asked her to hold the children as little as possible was because Annie Chun had said that many women were prone to postpartum illness after giving birth. Most of them had back pain from holding the children. Even though Jinwan's postpartum period had long passed, she had given birth to 2 children at once. In order not to leave her with any uncomfortable symptoms, Mo Jingshan did not allow her to do anything that was too tiring. Even when she fed the children, she had to limit the time and was not allowed to hold them for too long. Usually, under Jinwan's aggressive gaze, Mo Jingshan would allow her to hold the children for a while. Jinwan obtained the opportunity to hold the babies, and Daddy Mo, once again, obtained the opportunity to make 2 bottles of milk powder for the children. After sleeping peacefully, Jinwan carried Ning Ning, who was awake on the small bed. She walked around the kitchen with the children in her arms and turned to see the man who was measuring the water temperature inside. His actions were completely unlike the aloof, noble, and unapproachable CEO of Shine Group. If his current appearance was posted on the company's website, it would most likely cause an uproar in the industry. Who would have thought that the all-powerful CEO Mo in the business world would be labeled as such a warm man at home? Annie Chun went out to buy groceries, and there were only the two of them at home. On weekdays, as long as the babies fell asleep, Annie Chun and the servants in the Yew Garden would intentionally or unintentionally leave them alone. After all, as long as Mr. Mo was at home after work, there would be no problem even if they were not at home. "What do you want to eat tonight?" After making the milk powder, the man did not look back but asked her patiently and gently. Chapter 737. As she spoke, Jean Wan carried the 3-month-old Mo Jinning, who was already plump and fair. She turned and said as she walked, "Daddy's going to cook. Be good and go to the little bed to drink milk. Otherwise, Mommy won't be able to eat dinner and can only drink your milk powder." Mo Jingshan was extremely disgusted by Jean Wan's threatening the child. However, right now, he was even more shocked by her shameless act of snatching milk from the baby. "Are you hungry or what?" She did not know where he had conjured a small piece of dessert. At the same time, he rubbed her head. His actions were the same as when she held the child to feed him. Satisfied, Jean Wan held the child and the dessert in her arms and returned to the living room. At the same time, she looked back with the spoon on the dessert in her mouth and happened to catch the tenderness in Mo Jingshan's eyes that he couldn't retract. She thought about how she had spent the entire afternoon either drinking Annie Chen's food or sitting on the sofa watching TV while eating fruits and snacks. Jean Wan reflected on herself for a moment. She bit the spoon and asked, "Have I been eating too much recently?" She had not gained much weight when she was pregnant. In the past 3 months, she had lost a lot of weight. However, according to Annie Chun, she should eat more to look better. Jean Wan took advantage of the fact that she was still breastfeeding and did not need to worry about her figure. She ate more and more every day, but she still did not gain weight. The man smiled mildly. "No matter how much you eat, I can still afford to raise you." In the blink of an eye, Mo Jinan and Mo Jinning were 1.5 years old. The Spring Festival, the 5th day of the year, was the day to welcome the god of wealth. However, their god of wealth had gone to shine to work overtime. Annie Chun and the helpers were busy making dumplings, leaving Jinwan alone with an En and Ning Ning staring at each other. She had big eyes while the two of them had small eyes. Right now, this little thing's face was not even the size of a palm. Even if his eyes were as black and big as grapes, they would not be bigger than hers. It was fine to compare now, but in a few years, she would not compare with them anymore. Especially Ning Ning. She was a girl, and her features were like a miniature version of herself. However, she could not tell which part of her was prettier than her. Perhaps it was because Ning Ning often looked like Mo Jingshan. On the other hand, An's facial features were especially similar to his father's. He had been a handsome boy since he was young, but there were some expressions between his eyebrows that occasionally resembled her. The two children clearly felt different from each other, but every time they were put together, they seemed to be especially similar. Therefore, human genes were really powerful and magical. They could concentrate the strengths of their parents on their children, and it was as if two different people had completely merged into one. That night, by the time the families got a fortune, Boss Missouri returned from overtime. It was already after dinner. The company had an urgent matter that required him to personally make a decision, so he had no choice but to return a little late. However, when he returned home, he specially bought 3 servings of children's yogurt and lollipops to express his apology. 2 of them were baby yogurt, and there were also handmade milk lollipops without additives. It was definitely not a problem for babies to eat. The one for Jinwan was made of the same material, but the larger version had the sweetness of fruit candy. All in all, in his eyes, Jinwan's position was similar to An and Ning Ning's. They were both children who needed to be coaxed. Even if he came home an hour late, he had to quickly coax her to prevent his wife from being unhappy. Seeing that Boss Missouri had such self-awareness, Jean Wan was happy to not have to worry. She held the lollipops and ate them happily. After the Spring Festival, Mo Xiaoza and Madame Wanzhou missed their children too much in America. They wanted to bring the child to America to stay for 2 to 3 months. Annie Chun was used to taking care of the child and was worried, so she followed the child to America. Ever since the child was picked up by his grandparents, Jinwan finally had some free time to work at the company. After work, she wandered around the various pet markets out of boredom. She looked for all kinds of beautiful kittens, thinking that one day she would be able to live the life of a winner with both a child and a cat. Unexpectedly, when she bought a white rag doll and brought it home for the first time, Mr. Emo, who had rushed home, bumped into her at the door. They looked at each other in silence. He used his eyes to indicate for her to speak first. Jinwan swallowed her saliva, feeling a little nervous. His expression was so serious that it was as if the words "I'll let you run 39 meters first" were written on his face. "I want to raise it." She raised her head, puffed out her chest, and went straight to the point. "No." The man was resolute and decisive. "This month, I'll definitely eat half a bowl of rice every night." She began to settle for the next best thing. "Is there a point?" he asked in disdain. "I'll wear that sexy cat-eared lingerie that you like so much to warm your bed for a week." In times of crisis, people could be shameless, just like Jinwan. 1 month. The man was insatiable. 2 weeks. She bargained. 2 months. "Mr. Mo, why didn't you play by the rules?" 1 month deal. In the end, Jinwan could only grit her teeth in humiliation. Just like that, a new member was added to the family. Jinwan named the ragdoll Emo Shaoshan. Every time she called the cat, Emo Jingshan would subconsciously raise his head and pretend to cough before burying his attention back into the pile of documents. Emo Dashin, to think that you would have such a day. Jinwan's favorite time was every morning when she secretly opened her eyes. At that time, the sun had just climbed out of the horizon. Emo Jingshin punctually appeared in the open kitchen on the 2nd floor, unhurriedly making breakfast for the babies who had returned home. Sometimes, in order not to wake her up, he would close the bedroom door tightly when he left. Thus, Jinwan quietly got up and peeked through the crack in the door to see that he had prepared an and Ning Ning's breakfast. He then cut the fresh fish into small pieces and placed them on a plate. He casually placed it in front of Emo Shaoshan and got up to continue washing his hands. The rising sun tore apart the curtain of the night. With a slowly awakening warmth, it gently climbed over his shoulders and plated his body with a warm layer of gold. He turned around in the sunlight, and she saw his dark eyes brimming with love that only she knew. End of text. It's over. Thanks to the baby's support, Emo, Tuchuan, and Jinwan's story has come to a successful end. But the end is the beginning. I will send you a fragrant new novel as soon as possible. But recently, I should focus on writing about Nanheng and Fengling's side story. After all, this is also a very interesting story about a woman disguised as a man that I've been looking forward to for a long time. In my eyes, this pair is actually the main CP, not the secondary CP. After all, a woman disguised as a man is one of my favorite themes. Because Nanheng has always been relatively mysterious and has not appeared in many scenes, the content of the plot will not be limited by the main plot and the timeline. It can definitely be regarded as a wonderful new novel, the kind that is very doting, very exciting, and will definitely not let everyone down. The side stories updates are also no less than 6,000 words per day. For those who are not sure whether to follow the side story or not, they can first read the plot tomorrow and continue to follow it if they like it. Nanheng's side story introduction. The little disciple who used to eat and sleep with me, and who was kicked off the bed by me many times because she never took off her clothes when sleeping with me. I spent several years training this boy, but she suddenly became a girl. Now I can't face the 2 buns on her chest. What should I do? I'm waiting online urgently. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.